dimension where time does not exist, and the only thing that matters is film. We're back after a bit of a break to welcome you to October, one of our favorite months around here. That's Jay, and I'm Cole. And because we've had somewhat of an issue with getting some shows together here, it's very possible that our next show will be within the same week, possibly as soon as tomorrow. We'll see how that goes, because we don't want to lose too many more days. And like we said, we sort of had some plans for October. So we're trying our best to scramble and get some things together. So we'll, as soon as we can nail that down, we'll communicate through Twitter, at least what's going on there. But yes, you should expect another episode, not next week, but as soon as sometime within this week. But for tonight, as the title says, this is the 1999 film, The Virgin Suicides. This was the directorial debut for filmmaker Sofia Coppola, based on the 1993 novel of the same name by author Jeffrey Eugenides. I'm not sure, a Greek name. Might have messed up the pronunciation a bit there. And as Jay and I were saying before the show, it had the novel had a fairly profound effect on Coppola, because it was really sort of the deciding factor for her whether or not she wanted to be a director. But the quote here, she says something like, "I really didn't know I wanted to be a director until I read The Virgin Suicides and saw so clearly how it had to be done. I immediately saw the central story as being about what distance and time and memory do to you, and about the extraordinary power of the unfathomable." So yeah, I mean, it's kind of an enviable position to be in, because, you know, of who her father was, that she kind of is in a position to choose whether or not she's going to be a director. Because I don't know, I think it probably opens up a lot of doors. But I'm not saying she doesn't have merit. In fact, I'm going to praise this film a lot. I think it's a very good film, and she's proven herself to be a pretty good director. I know I've seen at least one other of her movies, but I can't think of what it is.
I know.
Oh, yeah, right, Lost in Translation, which is probably her most critically acclaimed and famous one. And I know that a few of her others are ones that I haven't seen, but at least a couple of them looked interesting to me, and I would have, like Marie Antoinette, looked interesting to me, but it's just something I didn't get around to seeing. And
The Beguiled is really good.
Yeah, and I've heard that The Beguiled, which is a fairly recent film, that's from 2017, is really good. Kirsten Dunst is in that too, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this movie actually marked the beginning of sort of a professional relationship between her and Dunst, because she would cast Dunst in a few other of her movies. And Kirsten Dunst had done some work before this, but she's 16. She's playing a 14-year-old. She's 16. Fairly believable. And this is kind of her big role. And that, and of course, when we talk about movies based on books, we'll talk about some of the differences. I really wanted to read the book beforehand, wasn't able to get my hands on it, which is too bad. But from what I can tell, this movie follows the book very closely. Probably the biggest difference I can find is that Kirsten Dunst's character, Lux, they kind of make her kind of a main character, which is really not how the book works. The book doesn't really differentiate too much between the sisters. But in this, I think they felt they had to put the focus on somebody. Plus, the stuff that happens to Lux in the movie does happen in the book. In fact, they even tone it down a bit, because actually one of the things that happens in the wake of the family's crackdown after the dance and stuff is that Lux actually has a pregnancy scare, which is something that is not brought up in the movie. But as far as how the five sisters are treated, from what I read, the author of the book, Eugenides or whatever, his intention was really so that they were less sort of individual characters and more sort of like a collective entity. Mm-hmm. And that is kind of a hard thing to express in film, so they did what they could with it.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see that. It kind of felt that way early on until they really, focused on Lux.
Mm-hmm.
So... Which, yeah, it's kind of odd that, I guess Kirsten Dunst was, on her way to being a pretty big actress. So that's probably the reason why she took the film, assuming she was going to be the main lead.
Yeah, I figure, because some of the other sisters, they don't really get too many lines. Mm-hmm. Although they're all important in their way. So just to set up here, this movie, like the book, is it's set in the late 70s in the suburbs of Michigan. And it's very much sort of the ennui of kind of suburban life, and also kind of the oppressiveness kind of that decade, the 70s. which is something I have to understand through things like books and film because I didn't live through it myself. But it's something that's been returned to a lot. Is sort of after kind of the cultural phenomenon explosion of what happened in the '60s. The '70s was kind of almost like a clamping down on certain things. Like it's like, oh, the '60s kind of got way too out of hand and too wild, and we need to tighten things up and stuff. And that's why the '70s, in some ways, not in all, but in some ways, seems kind of bland in some ways and oppressive, like I said. Plus, just historical context, there were some fairly serious things going on, although, of course, you can make that argument about any decade. We've never had a decade that was all la 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 and nothing serious happening in the world. But particularly when you think about Middle America, which is what this movie focuses on, you think about some of the challenges facing Middle America at the time, the disillusionment of Watergate and the Vietnam War were still fairly fresh, although this is a few years later. And of course, this being in Michigan, the collapse of the American auto industry, they're right at the heart of that, which is some of the backdrop for this book. It's not too important, but it's there. And the other thing...
Don't they mention that a couple times?
Yeah, they mentioned a couple times, and there's a part where they actually drive through protesting auto workers, which is weird because I wasn't really sure why they were where they were. And I also thought it was strange that, I mean, I get it. We've all seen like protests and strikes and stuff where the workers are out with signs and they get in people's way. But I'm thinking, how tone deaf are these guys that they see a funeral procession and they still block it? And it's not until the father, played by James Woods, gets out and talks to them that they let them through. I'm like, what kind of fucking idiots are you? You can see the cemetery behind them. And this is clearly a funeral procession. You can see the dark cars and the hearse and stuff, and they're still stopping the car, which I thought was really stupid. But yeah, so it is mentioned, and it also sort of fits in with the idea of this family. Crap, what the hell's the family's name? Suddenly I've lost it. Family's name is
Lisbon.
Lisbon, yes, thank you, Lisbon. The Lisbon family, I guess, are sort of supposed to be kind of typical of a lot of families in the '70s with children. Again, and that sort of let's return to traditional values thing after all the craziness of the '60s, and that this is a very conservative family. They're Catholic, and they're kind of hardcore Catholic, and the parents are so wrapped up in this that they're kind of inept when it comes to raising daughters. And of course, they were in the weird position of having 5 daughters between the ages of 13 right to 17, which would be a pretty difficult challenge for a family in any sort of country in any era, really.
Those ages, that would be a nightmare. Absolutely.
All at once. Yeah, 13 through 17, which would guarantee you, like, as parents, like, how many years with at least one teenager, like
well, jumping ahead a little bit, like
5 or 6 years.
When one of the boys is over at the house for some whatever reason, he opens a cabinet and it's like a wall of tampons, which I thought was just hilarious because you've got 5. I mean, not including the mom.
At least nowadays you have like places where you can buy stuff in bulk, like Costco. But yeah, can you imagine what it would be like? They're just going out to like the local drugstore and just stocking up on stuff like that.
Yeah. But Kathleen Turner and James Woods. It's hell of a.
It's interesting. Yeah, like Kathleen Turner's not an actress I ever really remember. I know who she is, but she needs to really be pointed out to me. She had a history with Sofia Coppola because they were in Peggy Sue Got Married. Mm-hmm. And I think she's well cast because of her voice and stuff. She always sort of projects this air of, I want to say, kind of refinement. Mm-hmm. You want to put it like she's kind of snobby. I think it fits. She did a voice for a character on King of the Hill, the beleaguered wife of Buck Strickland, and she uses sort of that voice, even a little more exaggerated. I always thought was like the idea is like she's like kind of like an old school lady, and she's really classy. That works. It's a kind of a different role for James Woods. It's interesting because James Woods, he's known for playing characters that are either super intense and or like smart asses, and often like combinations of the two. Yeah. Like with something like even in his voice work, like for Disney, he's Hades, who's all like, hey, how you doing? But then he's like, I'm Hades and intense. And that's what most of his characters are like. And this is very different because he's not intense or a smart ass. He's just basically kind of like a bland everyman
Mm-hmm.
who is somewhat ineffectual as a husband and father, and it's kind of I don't want to go so far to say it's a joke, but like, he's a teacher at the high school that the girls attend and well known to all everybody, and he's just sort of like a typical like boring nerdy type of guy. So
Well,
it's
he's
pretty
just
different
dying
for
for some male bonding.
yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty different sort of character for James Woods, who's usually more fiery, assertive, aggressive male character. So I think that it's kind of interesting seeing him in that kind of role, and shows some of his versatility, that he can play somebody a little more laid back and restrained and lame. Because usually James Woods is kind of cool. This guy is like not cool. He's lame.
Oh yeah.
So it's not so when you're thinking about casting a movie, it's not a name you would think of, but he pulls it off pretty well. And then we've got the various girls. Obviously, Kirsten Dunst is the most prominent of the characters, and it turns out girls. But Canadian actress AJ Cook is in there too, who I know a little bit. I don't watch too much TV, but she is on a show that I would watch a lot. She's on Criminal Minds. She's one of the main FBI agents on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a few other names that I know, but I don't really know who they are.
Yeah, none of them are really huge.
Yeah. So this movie has some Canadian stuff in it because it was shot in Toronto. Toronto sort of filling in for the suburbs of Detroit. Fair enough. It's not very far away geographically. And who else we got? A young unknown Hayden Christensen is in there.
Yeah, I had to do a double take, man. I was like, where was he?
Yeah, he's not that recognizable because he's so young.
It's just like right before he got cast as Anakin too.
Yeah. So he's kind of right on the cusp of sort of some stardom. There's probably another couple other Canadians that I can't think of, and also notably, the this being a period piece, a movie from the '90s set in the '70s. There's a appropriate amount of '70s music, but there is also some '90s music from one of my favorite bands, Sloan, or from here in Halifax. So basically, anytime you hear music that doesn't sound like '70s or you don't recognize it, it's probably a Sloan song. There's about 4 or 5 Sloan songs in there, and
Wow.
then when you hear something instrumental without any singing, that's the band Air. So Air, who I'm sure you're a bit familiar with their sort of dreamy sort of pop, do some of the songs in there too. But what's interesting with the Sloan is like, particularly the 2 records that the songs are from. I think it's from probably One Chord to Another, and maybe which was their '96 album, and there might have been a song or two from Twice Removed, their '94 album. Particularly One Chord to Another has a very '70s feel. It really feels like rock, so I think it's pretty seamless for a lot of people, particularly maybe Americans that don't know the band. Like, the songs don't sound out of place; they sound like they fit right into it. Like, there's a part, like one of my favorite songs by them is "Everything You've Done Wrong," which is the song that's playing when they're all driving to the dance together. And if you didn't know, you'd think, yeah, that sounds like kind of like a typical sort of '70s rock song, but no, it's a '90s rock song. So some Canadian flavor running through the movie, which of course I appreciate.
You've got damn Josh Hartnett, who
Yeah,
was in like every movie right around this period of time.
yeah, he's the heartthrob.
Yeah. And look, correct me if I'm wrong. Was his dad gay? Like, with a gay guy? I mean,
Yeah, that's what it seemed to be. It seemed to be
so
like he had like 2 dads, or yeah, his dad.
I was like, that was super progressive for back then.
Yeah, it's funny too because it's kind of a funny scene because he's asking his father for girl advice.
Yeah.
And his father's there with his boyfriend, partner, whatever, and they're trying their best to give their son girl advice. And it's like, well, not that they know anything really about girls.
Just be sincere. Ask her, about her studies.
But they try, and he's an interesting character, which we'll get into. But yeah, Josh Hartnett. It's always interesting too that so the movie is told in a flashback style, narrated by probably the only role I could ever stand Giovanni Ribisi in, because you don't see him. I don't dislike Giovanni Ribisi at all. This is just a personal hang-up. He just has a face that I want to punch. So only listening to him narrate is great. Then I don't have to see him.
He has a good voice for narration.
He does. And I mean, obviously he's young here too, but he's supposed to sort of straddle the lines because it's supposed to be it's supposed to be about like probably around the time that the movie came out in '99, because the idea is like this was their past when they were teenagers, and now they're grown up, and the idea is that even all these years later, it's all stuck with them, it's all lingered, it's all still part of their lives, which is really what's getting across in the book. So I was just going to say, yeah, it is sort of a challenging movie to adapt, because again, I haven't read the book, but based on what I've read about the book, is that because the narrative structure of the book is very different from the typical sort of book or story, in that it's not, I mean, for purposes of the movie, they have Giovanni Ribisi providing the narration throughout, and it's never specified which of the boys he is, because it's not important. And the way the book works is there's multiple narrators, and it's the boys, but again, it's interchangeable because it doesn't matter, because they're characters in the story, but it's not about them. They're more voyeurs. So it is sort of a challenging type of book to adapt to the screen from that standpoint, because it seems a little odd at first if you're not used to it. The idea that you have these boys and you're like, I don't even know who's who, because it doesn't matter. It's not about them. It's just about viewing the girls through the lens of these boys. So there's not too many other stories I can think of that are comparable in that way. Because usually, even when you have like a narrator talking about like their experiences, they inject themselves into the story more. Again, the boys are in the story. They are proactive. They do things in it, but again, they're less important. They're just more like a sort of like an agent that provokes some reaction, but it's not about them. So that's kind of a different approach that you don't see in a lot of movies. I can't even think of one other one. You've got a guest star providing his. Nice.
I really liked how they played up it's like every boy's fantasy, having these loose girls, all sisters, living in the same house,
Yeah. That's one thing I can totally like relate to, in that I haven't had anything really that comparable. But yes, if I was in the same situation, I would have been fixated and fascinated by them too. And that's really what it is. Because again, the idea is not just that you have like all these girls and they're all very attractive and stuff, but there's just this aura of mystery about them because of the way their parents are hiding them from the world, more or less.
Yeah.
Trying to protect them from the world. And you get the idea that even though the girls go to school, they don't seem to socialize with anybody. They just seem to socialize with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's clear that their parents have just sort of really discouraged them from interacting and mingling with their peers and just sort of keeping to themselves. And of course, as the movie goes, they clamp down even more on it. So yeah, it's something I can't relate to the actual experience, but I can relate to sort of the feelings that it evokes, because I would be very much in the same way. I'd be very fascinated by them. I'd want to. And then to add another layer to the fascination and mystery, it opens with the suicide of the first girl, the youngest. Let's get our names straight here. I've got them in front of me. So, not Bonnie. So let's see, Bonnie, Cecilia, Therese, Lux. Where's the last one? The one I'm talking about. Cecilia. Okay, it's Cecilia. There. Just had a bit of selected dyslexia there where I was staring at the name and I couldn't see it. So yeah, Cecilia's the youngest. She's 13. And it opens with them saying that she's the first to go, although it doesn't start with her actual death. It starts with her first suicide attempt.
It didn't really go into detail, did it, other than just she slit her wrists?
Mm-hmm. Just that she was in the bathtub and slit her wrists.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then she's being taken away in the ambulance, and they watch. Well, that's the other thing. I mean, the book and the movie are called The Virgin Suicides. There's no surprise. We know they're all going to wind up dead. So it's interesting. The very first line of the book, I think it's the book 2 and movie, is the narrator saying Cecilia was the first to go. But when it shows it, she's not her actually dying. It's her first failed attempt. And then you get, I think he only has one scene with Danny DeVito as the psychiatrist. But before that, when she's talking to the other doctor, he says, "What is it? You're too young to even know like how bad the world really is." And she goes, "Clearly, you've never been a 13-year-old girl." Which is a pretty good line.
Man, that's true though.
But at the same time, that's like the most sort of reasons we get, right? The whole idea is, and the thing that drives the story and echoes at the end is that the boys never get the answers they want. They never permeate pierce the mystery, like why the girls, any of them, let alone all of them, why they committed suicide. And obviously, in the end, it was like some sort of pact. It was obviously some plan to all go out together.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes you wonder why they set up that whole trip with the boys if they were just going to kill themselves.
Exactly.
But,
I can only figure they just wanted to add a little theater to it.
Yeah. Well.
But again, we're not really supposed to know.
Speculate. I think it's because she was forced to burn her Kiss albums.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. She was like, "No, not Kiss. You can burn a Kiss."
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead and you can.
Yeah, in hindsight, I don't know if Kiss really stands out as one of the great artists of the era.
Not Aerosmith.
There's people who would fight tooth and nail against me for saying that, though. But
Yeah.
not a fan of Kiss. Luckily, there's no Kiss on the soundtrack. There's some good 70s stuff on the soundtrack, like Electric Light Orchestra, who I like. Heart, who are okay. Heart have a couple songs.
Yeah.
The song. Gotten into him in the last few years. He's an interesting guy.
I think they played the 2 Heart songs that people know. Like the only 2 songs they ever had.
Yeah, one of them was like Magic Man. I don't remember the other one. I mean, did they play Barracuda? Because that's kind of like the one that people really know.
Yeah, I thought they did. That's it. There are no more Heart songs.
Yeah. Or These Dreams? Is that Heart?
I'm not sure.
I can't remember either. Might be mixing them up with somebody else.
I always thought it was funny because when I was a kid, I thought Rush sang Barracuda.
It sounds kind of like Geddy Lee.
He hits the same notes, man.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. Geddy Lee kind of sounds like a weird old woman when he sang. Even when he was a young man, that was just his style. And yet it worked for their music, so...
Yeah.
You know.
Man, there are some diehard Rush fans out there, as I'm sure you're aware.
Oh, God, yes.
But, yeah, I mean, they're, you talk shit about Rush, they'll fight you. Like,
oh, for sure. I mean, they're like the basis for like all progressive rock, right? So like, I like prog rock to a certain degree, but I can't appreciate the same way. Like and Rush is kind of like the start of it. But anybody that's like into any prog rock, they kind of think that they get music more than other people. I'm like, I get that the prog rock is more complicated, but that doesn't always make it good. It's just my argument.
I mean, I know up until a few years ago they were still touring.
They were here a few years ago. I didn't go because the ticket was like $150. I was furious. I was like, "You kidding me, Rush?"
Big time, man.
I mean, I in a way, I mean, it makes sense because Rush. It took them forever to really break through. Like, for like 20-some years, they were like not making money really. Like, people knew who they were, and people might have assumed, "Oh yeah, they have a lot of money." They didn't. It took a really long time. They were past their prime by the time they became like legitimate rock stars who broke through and were like, millionaires or whatever. But still, at the same time, I'm thinking, you shouldn't, I don't know, stick it to your fans like this, $150 for a ticket or whatever. Ridiculous.
Well, I think that's how those guys make their money now. Like, musicians in general is off, live events.
I guess so.
So like Guns N' Roses, those tickets are like $250 each, man. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, to see a band 30 years past its prime.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were a Guns N' Roses fan, I hope you saw them between like 1985 and 1995, because like that was kind of their era before it all imploded and they just got old. And I mean, I don't like them anyway. I'm not going to talk shit about them, but I just mean whatever band you like. I hope you got to see them in their prime, rather than paying $200 to see Axl surrounded by a bunch of musicians who aren't from the band that can just barely stand him. A bunch of paid mercenaries, basically, to be Guns N' Roses, when it's just Axl and a bunch of guys. And Axl's like 56 years old, or I don't know.
Oh, Slash isn't with the band anymore? I mean, even
Oh,
when they tour?
Oh, he might be. I don't know. I've lost track.
I don't know either. I don't think he is, because that guy Buckethead was with him for a while.
I love making jokes about that.
That odd.
Because the best part was, remember, like, Chinese Democracy was like, they were working on that for like what, a decade?
Decade, yeah.
And then there was like this part where around 2004 where it all imploded. And basically that's what Axl decided to say was the problem. He said it was all Buckethead's fault. He said that Buckethead was like, I don't know, like really unprofessional, and he was really, and I'm thinking it's pretty rich coming from you talking about unprofessional, Axl. But anyway, they wouldn't have fit into the soundtrack of this movie. This movie, the songs are more, there's some kind of hard rock, but it's more like the more laid back kind of style of the 70s, which fits. Yeah. And it makes sense, because I'm not really going to talk about this two times, and people who've watched this show for a while are probably sick of me talking about how I really like movies and stories that focus on memory, but it's true. I really like stuff that talks about memory. So sort of to fit that, the movie has kind of like a dreamy kind of atmosphere, and some of the music reflects that, which is why, for instance, Air does songs for the soundtrack, because Air are really that kind of music. But it is true, and I mean, I really do like stories, whether it's a movie or whatever, that talk about memory, because I don't know, it's just a universal thing. We all have it, and we all live our lives based on it. The person we are is formed by the memories of ourselves and the things that we did, and yet human memory is such an imperfect thing,
right?
As it's proven in like courtrooms across the world and stuff. How much people remember things differently, even though they went through the exact same thing. And I like how the movie seems to be through this lens of, like, it's real, but it kind of has an unreal, dreamy quality to it, which I like a lot, because it's in that hazy world between reality and whatever, as like memory or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Almost like with a gloss, like it's a little better than it actually was. The memory is a little better than.
Sure.
Like the girls.
Which is typical, because of course a lot of the movies about sort of adolescence. So that's one thing that we're all guilty of doing, is sort of romanticizing our adolescence. And of course, one of the things that is true of people of that age is like how like you're especially prone to strong feelings about things.
Oh yeah.
And this movie's all about that, specifically with the girls, but also through the lens, again, as you said, that's sort of the lens of voyeurism of the boys and their sort of fascination, because these girls were kind of unreal to them. Like, imagine just having these beautiful, mysterious girls who they often like refer to as like creatures and stuff, which I totally get, because I had that sort of fascination with girls at sometimes too. And I don't know, in some ways I haven't grown up, because I think I still feel things way too deeply sometimes. But anyway, in this case, you see a lot of that. Even with the scene you brought up of her like having to burn the records, like she's like crying, like, because just it means everything to her. And her, because that's the other thing. Imagine like your mom telling you have to throw out your records. That's bad enough, but no, your mom's saying physically burn them.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus.
Which kind of backfires. Filling the house up with burning plastic.
Yeah. Hadn't thought that one through.
But well, I mean, also you think about where she's coming from, like that's pretty much her main outlet to the outside world. And I've got to burn like the only thing in the world that I actually enjoy.
Right. Because she's not allowed to go out or hang out or do anything, but at least she has these records that she hears people talk about, and she can sit in her room and play them and dream about outside things. So yeah, losing the records, I understand, is a really big deal.
Oh yeah, I went through some of that stuff with my parents. Trashing some of my stuff when I'd get in trouble at school or whatever. My parents were of that age, or I don't know, age era or whatever, where you you're acting up in school, so it's got to be a cause. It's video games or the
Mm.
music you're listening to, or whatever you're into. So yeah, they really bought into that sometimes. So really sucked.
I can imagine.
Movies too.
It's not something I had to go through, luckily. I mean, I usually wasn't in trouble anyway, but when I was, I think my parents,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I
seemed
shouldn't
to
have.
have
I shouldn't have fucked up, and it wouldn't have happened. But
yeah. I think my parents had a pretty good awareness of like things like that. Although, I mean, the truth is, like, unlike my sister did get in some of that trouble, having some influences that my parents didn't approve of, but it's a little more complicated than just like pop culture stuff.
yeah,
But
it always is. It's not
yeah.
exactly that. I mean, I didn't, punch someone because I punched someone in, Mortal Kombat. But
Yeah.
and people still believe this kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. It'll be a scapegoat all the time. But as I said, that whole thing about feeling stuff and feeling it more deeply when you're younger, I feel like I haven't matured or grown up because I still sort of feel that way. It's funny, we talk about some of the negative things, when you talk about, oh, you see a violent movie, so it makes you violent, and then it's to go on and say it's like, anybody that sees a movie and is influenced to that degree, they already have problems, blah
Right.
blah blah blah, right? Like, I kind of am one of those people that already has problems. It just manifests itself in a different way.
Yeah.
Because like there's certain movies that present, and it's just because it's a different sphere. It's not something like something so as overtly negative as like being violent or going out and causing havoc or destruction. It's more like presenting, say, maybe a character that I can fall in love with, or presenting a scenario that either reminds me of my own life or I wish was my own life. Like, I still feel like I'm kind of as susceptible to that as I ever was, which is, I don't know if that's discouraging, or I should just think, oh, maybe that makes me special and different from other people, and maybe will help me as a writer. I don't know. People talk about artists, so they feel things differently. So yes, I'm a very sensitive artist, but at the same time, it's kind of annoying because I get so caught up and invested in certain things that, like, it's like I said, like, I own certain movies and stuff that I don't watch because I know, like, I emotionally can't handle them.
Yeah.
So I'll only watch them every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I've done a lot of, I know I'm going off the rails a bit, but I mean, I've done a lot of thinking of that over the years and looking into it and stuff. And it's more common than you think. And it's not really necessarily as serious as it sounds. Because I think, for instance, if you found yourself infatuated with a fictional character, you wouldn't want to tell anybody that.
Right.
And if you did, you would say, I'm in love with a character, the person doesn't even exist. How pathetic is that? Is kind of what you would think.
Yeah.
But really, when you think about it, it's not that pathetic at all. Because, I mean, are you under the impression that most people in love are actually in love with something real?
Mm-hmm.
Because most of them aren't, including people who are in relationship with another real person. You're very rarely in love with the real person. You're more in love with some sort of idea you have of the person. This also explains the breakdowns of most relationships. It explains why people can be so in love with each other and yet a few years later break up. Like, how does that even happen? Well, what happens is reality kind of sets in, and how you deal with it and how you handle it really determines whether the relationship lasts or not. If you don't handle it well, then it falls away. If you do handle it well, it means, okay, obviously the person you love is kind of an idealized thing that doesn't really exist, but this person is a close enough approximation, and you can accept, the differences, and they can accept the differences in you because it works both ways. Mm-hmm. But when other people talk about like falling out of love, that's really kind of what it is with a lot of things. Is you have this idealized image of a person that you're in love with and infatuated with, and reality eventually sets in. Well, they're not that. It doesn't mean they're bad or anything, but they're not what you wanted, because we often build these things up. And so, yeah, so I don't really feel ashamed about it anymore, because I realize it's actually a much more common thing, and it's much more human than you'd think. Because, yeah, for years I used to feel a certain amount of guilt and shame when it came to that sort of thing. But now I think it's actually very normal. So,
yeah, well, I mean, at least it's not a a pillow with an anime character on it.
Exactly.
as
I've
I've heard that they're quite popular.
It's all in your mind. Which is kind of like it's kind of like that chivalric love, or however you say it. That kind of love that they used to talk about in medieval times, where the knight would ride up to the tower and the woman would wave to him, but they'd never actually see each other or touch, but they were in love and it was so real and stuff. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Again, because it's like, well, he only saw her in the tower, she only saw him on the horse. They kind of saw each other in like the most romantic, best possible scenario, but as far as the actual reality of it, they didn't deal with that. And yet it's described in all this poetry and literature as like the highest and most pure form of love, which really says something again about sort of the human condition and the way we see love and the way we love each other. So yeah, so that's something that I've come to feel better about over the last few years as I've come to understand it better. So I don't feel as guilty, but at the same time, it still does grate on me sometimes. And there's certain books and movies and stuff that I just get too swept up in them.
Mm-hmm.
This movie, luckily, is not one of those. Even though it's a movie I can relate to strongly, I can watch it and I feel fun. Because nothing is. Because one thing, I don't love any of the girls in it, and the other, although again, maybe I could, and the other is it doesn't remind me too strongly of anything necessarily from my own life. It just reminds me in more general and vague ways. So yeah, so there's a lot of different themes going on here. The idealized love I was just blabbing about isn't necessarily a major one, but you do see it come up a bit in this. And a lot of it, again, has less to do with love and more to do with sort of infatuation and fascination, really, because these girls are just such a fascinating group, as you'd imagine. And then the whole aura, and again, their aura is intensified by the suicide of the first girl, also leading to the way their parents clamp down on them and their own response to it. They don't show enough of it, but there's a great shot of where right in the wake of Cecilia's suicide, where they bring the doctor or whoever over to the house, and he steps into the bedroom to talk to them, and they're all just sort of lying down together.
Yeah.
And it really, I think, is a good visual representation of what the author had been talking about in the book about how they're kind of like an entity. Because the idea was they used to be 5 and now they're 4. And
right.
So it goes beyond, because obviously, for anybody, if you had a sibling or a family member that committed suicide, that would affect you very strongly and emotionally, and it would make you sad. But just the way they frame this makes it a little different than most people, because the idea, again, it's like 5 is down to 4, and it's like it's weakened them. And it's like they all kind of feel like physically kind of the loss, not just emotionally. It's almost like having a hole.
But it's almost like they don't acknowledge it also. Like when they go back to school, after her death, it's like I know the narrator comments on it, how, they were, smiling and laughing like nothing happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess it's just sort of, the difference between how they are at home and the face they try to put on for the world.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the sisters, not Lux, she's talking with, some other friends at school, and it's like a character in a book that dies or something.
Yeah. It's just like, oh my God, I can't believe I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Because, kids are like that. It's like.
But she's not phased at all. She's like, why? Well, it doesn't matter, or whatever.
But it is kind of true, though. It's like, oh, her sister died. Now we have to pretend death doesn't exist. Yeah. Like, death for everybody. It's a part of life. It's there. But yeah, that just reminds me of the way teenage girls especially are. It's like, oh, I'm so sorry because I mentioned that. It's like, well, yeah, death is a thing that happens. It's not insensitive of you to mention that we're talking about a character in a book that dies for a book report or whatever. But yeah. There's an interesting bit where one of the boys from the group tries to talk to one of them.
Yeah.
She's just like, you don't have to talk to me. Like, it's the other thing that leads to some sort of fascination about the girls is like, they don't really seem to understand how they fit into the world or why boys would be attracted to them. Like, they don't seem to get it at all. The boy is very happy to talk to her. Here's this pretty girl, and here's a chance to maybe talk to her. And she thinks that he's like talking to her out of some sort of obligation because he feels bad about her sister. But I mean, maybe he does. But I mean, the fact is, he just wants to be able to talk to her. He'd love to be able to get to know her. He's attracted to her. He's interested in her. That doesn't even register for her. She's like, you don't have to talk to me. So
Yeah.
they
She
have
said,
very
I've been to
different.
school my entire life. I know who you are.
Yeah.
Because it was one of the boys that I guess he said I'm so and so. I forget his name, but
Yeah.
He was one of the ones that was at the party that they had the one time they had the birthday party or whatever party it was they had.
Yeah. And I guess we should talk about that because we started saying about how Cecilia had opened Cecilia slitting her wrists, but not dying. Yeah, I'll go into it. And what happens is when she actually does kill herself, the circumstances are pretty different because in the wake of Cecilia finally coming back, her sisters convinced the parents, we need to do something to cheer her up. You're always cutting us off from the outside world. Plus, there was the thing where Danny DeVito's character, the psychiatrist, had said maybe Cecilia would benefit from being able to hang out with some boys of her own age because it seems that you've totally isolated her from that. So begrudgingly, they throw this party and invite some of the neighborhood boys, including the boys who are the group that the narrator's a part of. And it's during this party, and the girls seem to be enjoying themselves a little bit, that Cecilia excuses herself to go upstairs. And then what happens is she actually does finish the job committing suicide in a much different way. She leaps out the window. It's only a second-story window, but she winds up impaling herself on the spikes of their what is it, a wrought iron fence. Very sort of grisly death. So yeah, that's an important point to bring up, that the boys are actually there for her successful suicide, and it's a really weird scene. And you would expect it would be, because it's like, well, what would you do if you were in their place? Because what happens is they all come outside, and the mother and father are freaking out. They're like, oh my God, because there she is. She's dead. She's impaled on the fence. And the boys just sort of look on, as you would, but then they just kind of wander away. Like they don't know what else to do. And it seems like the wrong thing to do, but maybe it's the right thing to do. Like, would it be right to just stay there? I don't know. A social situation that usually comes up, right? Like, what do you do if you're at a party and one of your hosts kills herself? Do you stick around with the rest of the family until the ambulance or whatever comes, or do you leave? In their case, they didn't know what to do, so they just kind of wander off, like looking and gawking. I guess it's just, again, supposed to point out kind of the awkwardness of the situation and that age. Like, these boys, they really don't know what to do, so they leave. Yeah. But Jay's returning shortly. Should still be able to fill this time what else we got going on here. But yeah, so it's a really different sort of scenario, because at first it was at least sort of somewhat of a private thing when she'd cut her wrists in the bathtub, although of course by the time the ambulance came, it became very public and the whole neighborhood knew and everybody knew about it. But still, it's much less of a spectacle than impaling yourself on a fence during a party. So pretty crazy situation there. What's my Snapple thing say? There have been 85 recorded instances of a pitcher striking out 4 batters in 1 inning. Great. Isn't baseball fascinating? Not to me, but okay. So what moves on from there? Let's see. In the wake of Cecilia's suicide, we get back to what we were saying before about all the girls lying there together. But then when they do go back to school, just sort of trying to put on a brave face of the world and act like everything's okay, while the boys keep trying to penetrate their mystery. It's like, and they're trying to find out things. And this is where we find out that Lux has been at least somewhat more social than the others. And we don't really know if it's true or not, because they say that Lux starts to like go out with some of these boys, not the narrators, but some other boys. But we don't know if they're telling the truth or not, because then they get a few secondhand accounts, and they usually brag that they like made out with her or felt her up or something like that. But we don't really know if that actually happened or not. The only thing we really know is what happens with Trip, the character played by Josh Hartnett. And Trip is the school heartthrob, and all the girls in the school are in love with him. And there's a few different things going on there. There's a montage to show just how much the girls love him, including a part where some girl like not only does his like homework assignment for him, but also has like baked brownies for him.
And then they have sex.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so we get Trip, a guy that can have any girl he wants, and of course he wants the one girl that doesn't seem to be interested in him, Lux, because that's how always the way with these people. You know, you can have whatever you want, but you want the one thing you can't have. So he fixates on her and formulates a pretty good plan that he actually starts to put into action. I'll give him credit for his persistence. I wouldn't have made it past that awkward evening watching TV with the family. I would have been out after that, man.
Oh, yeah.
You know, saying, I hope we can go out sometimes. Like, well, my parents don't let me out, but you can come watch TV with us. And they're all down like in the basement or whatever, and they're watching TV. They're watching some sort of, and it's everybody. It's all the other girls and both parents, and the mother's like reading the TV guide. Oh yeah.
But yeah, Trip's an interesting character. You know, because when he's first introduced, I think we're supposed to think he has a larger role. He's going to have a larger role than he actually does. Because, you know, he's probably in like a solid 30 minutes of the film, but after that, you don't really. I mean, I think you may get some narration from his older, the guy playing him as an older adult.
Michael Pare.
But
who in hindsight seems to have been a pretty good choice. I mean, yeah, the present day Josh Hartnett doesn't really look that too much like 1999 Michael Pare, but you see the similarities. They did a pretty decent job there.
I like Josh Hartnett fine, but I mean, how many movies did he play like the burnout heartthrob, you know, in high school? Like Halloween, H2O, the one with the alien.
The Faculty.
Yeah.
Well, in The Faculty, he's supposed to be a little more of an outsider, right? Like, he's just more of the burnout. In this one, he is, like, the most popular boy. He's the heartthrob that all the girls love. In fact, he might have even been a little miscast in that, because he was kind of too good-looking to be such an outcast in The Faculty, right? Because they were like, oh, he's the weird kid, you know, they're selling drugs out of the, what is it, the trunk of his car or whatever.
Drugs, but it's just caffeine and some other stuff.
Guaranteed to jack you up.
That are in like pencil cases or pen.
I don't know. They like snort. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very specific niche market they had going there, but it was relevant to the plot. But yeah, I mean, the idea is the sort of like Josh Hartnett. He's not that important, but he is sort of a catalyst for some of the things that would follow, of course. But yeah, I would not have been able to make it past that awkward night. Like, to this day, I don't like. I mean, one thing that's good, but so I always complain about how much it sucks, like dating as you get older and dating in your 30s. One thing that's better is like I don't have to like meet her parents usually.
Yeah.
You always had to do that in your teens.
Mm-hmm.
There was just no way around it. I mean, I had good training for that because my first like real serious girlfriend was like kind of the worst case scenario for me. Because she was from not really a big family, but she was from a close-knit family. And while she wasn't from a big family, like immediate family, all of her like her auxiliary family like lived in like some of them like lived right next door to her. So she was always surrounded by relatives. And she lived way out in the country. And her father was like this big, intimidating guy who was like nothing like me, who probably was not wonder why his daughter was interested in somebody like me and stuff. And this is when I had first learned to drive, and I had drive out there. She lived way out in the country. And what you want to do if you're going to pick up a girl, if you're somebody like me, what you would like to do is drive up very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very discreetly and just park and then knock on the door and then get her the hell out of there. You couldn't do that with my first girlfriend. She lived way out in the country and like off this like highway on a really long lane. So basically, once you turn onto the lane, like there's not just her house, but there's several other houses, and everybody knows you're coming. Everybody sees you. It's like this long, long process of getting in there. Not to mention this being the country, there were dogs, and dogs would like chase the car. I was always worried I was going to run one over because all these dogs would come out to me. So anytime I came, I couldn't do it discreetly or quietly. I had to drive up like I was a goddamn parade. So everybody knew I was there. Oh man, so it was kind of good training, yeah, in a way, because like her family intimidated the hell out of me and her stupid burnout older brother, who was born on the same day as me. Here's a weird coincidence. So for my whole life, my mother often told the story at my birth about how it was during the 1983 Stanley Cup Finals, because back then the finals actually did end at the end of April, my birthday being at the end of April, and maybe the start of May. Now they stretch into June, for God's sakes. But back then they did wrap up quicker, and it was the fourth cup in a row for the Islanders. Their last. They were the last great dynasty of the NHL, you might argue. 4 cups in a row from 80 to 83. And my mom wasn't an Islanders fan per se, but she did like them because they had several players who had used to be Bruins in the 70s, and she was actually a Bruins fan. And my mother, even though I was only her second child, apparently that was enough for her to feel completely calm and not worried at all about giving birth to me, and that she was watching the hockey game. But she had to share the room with this woman who she said was hysterical and screaming, and she said it was just so embarrassing. All the years later, I found out that was my girlfriend's mother giving birth to her son.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Weird, isn't it? And I'm thinking that was also her. And now that I know, I'm thinking that was also her second child. So she'd been through it before. But my mother always, like, in telling the story, would talk about how, like, embarrassing this woman was. About how, like, she screamed and was hysterical and and the nurses, she was always screaming at the nurses and acting like a big drama queen and stuff. And then I found out that, yeah, that. But anyway, my point being that it's one perk now is, like, when I date girls, I don't have to go to, like, their house and hang out with their parents. But yeah. So I just thought that night was really awkward when he's sitting there and they're, like, trying to find something on TV, and the mother's, like, reading, like, about some sort of, like, nature program. She's like, oh, this sounds good and educational and stuff. And then she's like, oh, it's so late, you have to get out. And then he just has the awkward sort of goodbye with her, but then suddenly she like pounces on him in the car and makes out with him furiously. So he knows, yes, this is all worth it. It's worth it. And she's like, I have to be back for bed check.
Makes out with him for like a solid 20 seconds.
Mm-hmm. So my original point was I give him credit for his follow through on that. So I don't know if I would have been able to do the same. Of course, he gets a little too ambitious.
Yeah, different time. I can understand. But like you said,
Yeah.
he was out for more of the, the domination. He wanted to conquer it.
Yeah, it was more conquest, which is why, like, regardless of the era, he comes off as a real prick because he's really professing to everybody around him, and Lux, that she's different and special, and he really does love her. Like, it was so easy to him to have girls, but she was special and different. Then as soon as he finally gets to have sex with her, he abandons her. And there's no good explanation because they even show him in the present day talking about it. He goes, I really liked her, but on the football field, I don't know, it was just different. And I didn't care how she got home, and I left. And then he reflects and says, like, it was like a true love. And he's like, most people don't get to experience that. At least I got to experience it once. And then he leaves, and he's just like, you're full of shit, buddy. Like, it was all about the conquest for you, and once it was over, you were done with it.
Yeah, that was one part that didn't really make a lot of sense, how he just left her there.
I can understand it because, like, he's a prick, and the pursuit is over. What I don't understand is why there weren't a little bit more consequences, because he had to go through all this stuff to get the father and mother to agree to let the girls go out. Then the worst case scenario for them basically happens, and then one of the girls doesn't come home. Plus, he talked to this through the father, who's a teacher at the school. How could he not be worried about consequences? What, he's going to, like, just walk past the father in the hallway? And like, I get that James Woods' character is, as we said, he's not like a tough guy or an intense guy. You're telling me he would have no reaction at all? Like, I would not have the guts to do that. Let's say I'm that kind of asshole where I could, like, abandon a girl after having sex with her and just leave her to her own devices to get home on a night like that I promised to get her home to her parents. But, like, who would have the audacity to do it when you're going to the school that the goddamn father is a teacher in? Like, that, I never understood that, how there couldn't have been consequences. How even James Woods' wimpy character wouldn't, like, accost him in the hallway and be like, you little son of a bitch, like, you left my daughter? Like, there's no follow-through, there's no consequences, which I didn't get. I was waiting, like, the very first time I saw the movie, which was many years ago, we didn't talk about when we saw the movies, but I probably first saw this movie, I don't know, maybe 2002, 2003, something like that. So, and I've seen it plenty of times since. So, but yeah, so I can recall the very first time I watched it, I was waiting for that. I thought there would be some sort of reaction. I couldn't believe that he had the gall to pull that shit. Not to pull the shit on the girl. Like, I get the guys are that kind of jerks, but he was so stupid to not realize that he was going to really have to pay for it. And then he doesn't. And he says, I never saw her again after that. And yeah, that makes sense because right after that, they pulled the girls out of school, but the father is still there. So what the hell? So I always thought that was sort of like a weird plot hole that is not addressed. And like the father is right there at the school with you, and he never says a word to you about it.
I mean, I don't get how he was able to leave her there. Just common human decency, whatever, throw her to the curb or whatever. But I mean, at least wake her up so she's not, late getting home. And I don't know.
Yeah. Again, I think part of it is him being a jerk, and part of it is just sheer panic, in a way.
That's a special breed of asshole right there.
Yeah. So yeah, I can believe that. I just can't believe him not having the foresight to realize that like it would come back on him. But then when you watch the movie, it doesn't come back on him, which I don't understand at all. It's like, what kind of pussy is the father? I get that he's a pussy, but he's so much of a pussy that he doesn't say one word to this kid. One word. And the way the mother is like so mad, you think that she would really like go after you. You think there would be a scene of her like calling up his like gay dad or whatever and screaming at him over the phone. Nothing happens.
Isn't this right around the time that the dad is like talking to the plants and stuff? So I think he may be like going off the deep end. So,
yeah, and they kind of show that.
But it's that scene's hilarious. He's like, "Oh, how are you? Have you photosynthesized today yet?"
Yeah. And again, it's for people that are used to like the typical James Woods role. If you haven't seen the movie, I'd recommend it because it's interesting to see him play such a different sort of character. I mean, it's not an amazing performance or anything, but it's different and it's enjoyable. But what I was talking about when you left was, about the weird circumstances, how like the movie opens with the suicide attempt, but then the actual circumstances of the real suicide are much different. It's the first little crack where they, because of after Danny DeVito's character saying, what Cecilia might benefit from being able to hang out with some of the boys in her age group because, they've been isolated, is where they have the idea to have the house party and invite some of the boys. And it's during the party that Cecilia kills herself in a very gruesome and public way. She impales herself on the fence, jumping out the window. I was saying, I mean, it's one of those scenes where at first you think, how weird is like that to act that way? But then you think, what would you do? What I was saying was, remember, they come outside, they see her impaled, and of course the mother's freaking out and the father's there, and the boys walk out and they're all bewildered and shocked too. And then they just kind of leave. Like, I mean, I have to admit, what is the right thing to do in that scenario? Do you just stand around and wait for the ambulance or try to talk to somebody? Or
I think leaving probably is the best, giving the family, let them cope.
Yeah, I suppose. But it just looks so weird. They're just sort of like,
yeah,
and they just sort of wander off. It's almost funny. I mean, it's super tragic circumstances, right? But the boys are like, "Oh gosh, I guess the party's over."
Yeah, I guess the party's over. I'm not going to make out with one of these sisters tonight. I can already tell.
What was up with the really weird boy? What fucking language was he singing in? Remember they had that really weird guy, and they were like, "Sing a song," and he tunelessly sings some sort of weird song, and they're all like, "Oh yeah."
I was gonna say, it seems like they were like genuinely like friends with that guy. Like they weren't like making fun of him.
No, they seemed to think he was funny and interesting.
And they kept flipping and saying heads, flipping the coin and saying heads, and and at first I was like, oh man, they're making fun of the mentally challenged guy. But it genuinely seems like they were, friends with this guy.
Yeah, and I didn't know if he was mentally challenged or if he was foreign, because then he sings like a song in like another language or something.
I thought he was kind of Down syndrome.
Maybe.
Anybody
wants to clarify on that? I don't really know.
I don't know.
Yeah. But here's something that I like. It's a fairly brisk movie. It's not long, and it moves along nicely. there is a little bit of preamble at the start where I'm not really sure what the point is, where they actually talk about how, remember there was like this foreign exchange student kid. He was like, I don't know, Hispanic or something. And he was staying with another family. And he fell in love, but not with one of the sisters. He fell in love with some other girl. And then when the girl went on vacation to profess his love, and again, this is part of how like teenagers feel things more, he jumps off the roof or whatever. Except that it in no way hurts him. And he just sort of walks away from it. I'm not really sure what that contributes to the rest of the plot. Except it shows that, yes, teenagers are weird and prone to infatuation, and dramatic romantic gestures are what they think is romantic.
Maybe it's just foreshadowing her jumping off the roof, or
I don't know. Because what's really weird is like they mentioned like he's desperately in love with some girl, and it's not one of the 5 girls. It's some completely other unrelated girl named like Porter or something. Yeah, and then after him, there's another boy, and he's the first boy that gets like invited to the house when he has like dinner with the family. And yeah, where the father is desperately trying to talk to him about like airplanes and stuff, which continues at the house party later with the other boys. Remember, he's got like the models, and he's showing them the models and talking about World War II planes.
Right, always loving it. Yeah,
I was really into World War II planes when I was that age, so he would have liked me.
Yeah. What's the time frame for this movie, like from start to finish? Because
it's supposed to be almost a year.
Because I know at one point they speed it up and show a few different seasons, while the girls are just kind of trapped inside.
It's supposed to. It's about a year because, like, they mention on the news report later that it was like because when they were after the suicides of the last of them, they refer to Cecilia's suicide as last summer. So it's roughly a calendar year, I'd say, from one summer to another. I think
that makes sense.
Something like that.
One of the younger boys, I just learned this the other day, that Talia Shire and Francis Ford Coppola were siblings. I had no idea. I don't know how I didn't know that, but
I never knew that.
Yeah, they're siblings.
How Talia Shire has a career, because I never understood why she got into movies.
But I mean, explains why she was in The Godfather and stuff now. But and her son is Jason Schwartzman and also Robert Schwartzman, and Robert Schwartzman is one of the boys. So that would be Sophia's.
And isn't Nicolas Cage a Coppola?
Yeah,
yeah.
That's a hell of a family right there.
Yeah.
I like Jason Schwartzman a lot too. He does lots of cool stuff.
Yeah, he's cool. Obviously, he's in a lot of Wes Anderson stuff, of course, too. Part of that stable of actors.
But I was telling you who had recommended the book or who gave the book to Sophia to begin with, and this is pretty interesting. The Sonic Youth, Thurston Moore.
Oh, okay.
So that's pretty cool.
Kim Deal's the one I know from that. Wasn't that her name? Kim Deal? Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting that, this studio wanted to make this movie and they were going to go with a different screenplay.
Yeah,
but
right. Written by Nick Gomez.
But then they read hers and actually liked hers better and let her make the movie. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Nick Gomez, a very prolific TV director. He's directed a billion things on TV, including some of the most successful shows lately. Did episodes of The Daredevil Show, Burn Notice, Supergirl, Dexter, House. So yeah.
Seems to be those guys when they get their foot in the door, they kind of just stay there because it's I imagine, a pretty cushy job. Pays well, not too hard. You don't have a lot of backlash from the studios.
Mm-hmm. It's very true.
Because you see a lot of feature film directors go that route, probably just because it's easier.
It's always weird when actors direct episodes of TV shows, especially when it's ones they're not necessarily on. I can't remember, but one of my favorite episodes of 30 Rock, which is a show I like quite a bit. I can't remember what episode it is, but it's one of my favorites. So it's one I've watched multiple times because I think it's one of the best ones. It was directed by Steve Buscemi.
Oh
who
wow.
has had a role on the show, not like a major role. He's had like a guest spot here and there. He played this. He's in like 2 or 3 episodes where he plays like this weird private eye that gets hired to like dig up dirt on people.
Oh really? I don't even remember him.
But he actually directed one of my favorite episodes of it, and he's not in that episode. I'm like, how did this happen? How does this go apart?
Well, usually when you have long running shows, all of the main stars like Friends, they all directed episodes.
They all get to direct an episode, yeah.
Like Star Trek: The Next Generation, like Jonathan Frakes, like directed like the majority of that show. I think after a certain period of time. Riker.
Yeah, I don't know the characters, but I know the actor.
Guy with the beard.
Yeah,
you probably know you.
I know him better as Xanatos on Gargoyles.
But yeah, he went on to do all kinds of TV stuff afterward too. Directing TV movies and TV shows.
Yeah. And not to jump around too much because there is other stuff to talk about, but while I'm looking back on the Wikipedia page again about it, I thought it was interesting reading some of the reviews here, because one of the ones I think is really stupid is Graham Fuller of the New York Times gave the film a middling review, writing, Ms. Coppola has made a haunting metaphysical celebration of adolescence with the aura of a myth. It starts off well, I would agree. Yet, on the surface, there's something wrong with this picture. How can a film in which a quintet of apparently normal girls commit suicide possibly be a celebration? And why would a filmmaker attempt to make it so unless she is uncommonly perverse? Like, what the fuck are you talking about, dude?
That's just ignorant.
I mean, the movie is a real celebration of, like, death. Like, I don't know even what you're trying to say.
It's encouraging young girls to commit suicide.
For God's sake. But yeah, but that does remind me of something of another film that we did on this show, which was Donnie Darko. I thought it was interesting that in Donnie Darko, there's a whole thing where, like, there's more of it in Donnie Darko where you get the moral crusaders and you have the parents all, reacting to a situation and making them do stuff. There's a little bit of this because remember because in the wake of the first suicide, they're trying to figure this. Everybody's suddenly talking like, teen suicide is a big issue in this country. We need to do something. There's this whole thing about trying to like educate the kids, and they're talking about sending out pamphlets. What was it, like green pamphlets? It's like in like the meeting, we decided red was too provocative. So it's like green pamphlets or something, and they all had to like sit through stuff. I wish there was a bit more of that because I think it could have been played for laughs quite well, like they kind of did in Donnie Darko. That wasn't a suicide thing, but it was, I can't remember what it actually was, but because that's kind of like what it was. That was in the 80s, and this one is the 70s, and even today it's sort of the same thing. One kid, some kid runs away or some kid commits suicide or something, and then it becomes this big hot button issue, and everybody's talking about it, and it's like we have to educate the children properly, and it's always so bad and awkward and stupid.
Well,
it's just a knee-jerk reaction. And again, these are real issues, yes,
yeah.
but they always go about in such clumsy fashion.
Right. Well, it's just like a news blurb. It's a news story. Let's keep this thing in the news because it gets us ad revenue.
Right, and that's mentioned twice in the movie too, with the female reporter, and that's brought up in other movies and stories too. It's sort of like the way it's true, like how our media in particular likes to sort of glorify teen suicide. Like there's something just so special and different about it, and of course the mystery is there.
Well, and everything she says is like complete bullshit too. Like she spoke to the like 2 of the sisters for like 2 sentences, and that's where she got all of her information. Like the tree where young Cecilia used to write her poetry.
Yeah. But it plays well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It bleeds, it reads, right? Bleeds.
Yeah. But I just thought that the whole thing about the New York Times thing, like accusing Coppola of being uncommonly perverse because of her approach to the movie. It was like, I guess you didn't read the book because the book has the same sort of approach. So are you saying it's just uncommonly perverse to do a celebration of youth and the innocence and stuff just because suicide happens to take place in it? Like, give me a break.
I would almost say the opposite because, I mean, it's the title of the film and the book, so, we all know it's coming and it's really downplayed quite a bit and it's not even the main focus of the film. It's really the boys is what it's about.
Yeah, it's about the boys trying to understand them, try to get close to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll get into that. There's a bit where, in the wake of Cecilia's death, they managed to get a hold of some of her stuff, including her diary. And it is sort of an interesting scene because at first you think the boys are like, oh, anything juicy in the diary, anything good. But then you just see how they just become very interested in the normal everyday stuff she writes. And they like it because it helps them finally relate to the girls a bit. And this is where it reminds me a little bit of myself. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's more than just a sexual fantasy. Like they're actually infatuated with these girls in every aspect. They have fantasies of going on vacations and things, not just
like they're drawn in, from maybe the sexual standpoint to start. They're boys, they're pretty girls, but then it goes much deeper. Exactly, like because they do want to see them and understand them as people. And it is an interesting idea of like you go to school with these girls and they live in the neighborhood, but you don't know them. They're isolated and they keep to themselves and they don't mingle and interact with the way other kids do. They're separate and they're others. So and you want to know them and you want to understand them. And then when one of them kills herself, it deepens the mystery. It's like, why did she do that? What is going on? And what's great is the movie, and I don't think, because again, following the book isn't trying to hint at any sort of deeper answers. It's not trying to talk about. It shows the parents as fairly inept and a bit overbearing, but they're not terrible parents, and they're parents that do love their daughters, even if they're a bit clumsy in the way they show it sometimes. It's not like, okay, some sort of terrible abusive atmosphere. You could make the argument that once they're pulled out of school, it's kind of close to abuse. I mean, depends on how you want to classify it, but it certainly wasn't a good move to just yank the girls out of school after that, especially considering it's not like she even started homeschooling them because at first I think that's what you think. Okay, now they're homeschooling them. But then there's a part where they're like another teacher is taught, or the principal or whoever is talking to him, and he's just like, your daughters haven't been here for 2 weeks. What the hell's going on, man? And he's just like, he doesn't know.
But, so are you sure they're not around here somewhere or something like that?
Yeah, he said something like that. It's like you fucking full well they're not. But again, they make it very clear that he's the beta, that the wife is the alpha. She makes the decisions, and even it even goes back to like when Trip is like trying to propose it, because you see he wants to loosen things up a little bit. He's like, I'll have to discuss it with the wife, Trip, because she calls the shots. And then of course, when Trip does what he does, it all blows up in their face, because it's the worst case scenario, everything she worried about. And the girls were so happy and excited. I like the dance stuff because you just see that they were so happy and excited to finally do something normal for their age group.
Are we supposed to assume that the younger ones like went and, well, I guess Lux was one of the younger ones at that point?
Yeah, she was the youngest after
Cecilia.
Yeah, she was the youngest after Cecilia.
So are we supposed to
she wound up.
They all went and lost their virginity?
No, I don't think so. I think it's only Lux. Like, it really is supposed to be the virgin suicides. Lux is just the exception, the strong exception. So we'll get into that too. So not only does Lux lose her virginity to Trip, but then after that, when they're cut off from the world and stuck in the house, this is where the boys kind of like step up their surveillance and actually start trying to watch them through like a telescope and stuff. They find out that Lux is starting to have nightly trysts on the roof with random men, and they get a front row seats for that. And you can have different theories on why she reacts this way. My theory is that she's trying to prove that Trip wasn't special. To me, she's trying to say, Trip, I lost my virginity to Trip. It's supposed to be like a big deal. I'm going to prove it's not a big deal. Like, I could fuck anybody. It's kind of how the way I see it. Like, she's trying to like take out, to nullify the act, to make it seem like it wasn't special. Look, I could do it with anyone. Here, this guy, that guy, whatever. It's kind of the vibe I got from it.
Yeah, well, she's just trying to spice up her life, I guess, because it's kind of boring.
Yeah, and there's that too, right? It's kind of like the ultimate rebellion, because that's like the main thing her parents are worried about of all the things, is that it's like keeping them impure. And of course, she's very young at the time too, so they're not even necessarily wrong about that. But you see sort of you go to extremes, the girls will go to their own extremes, or at least Lux will. And this is where Lux starts to differentiate from the rest of the girls, at least in the movie. Because at this point, the other girls sort of fade into the background more. They're there, but the focus more becomes on Lux because she's the one who's proactively doing different stuff and some shocking stuff. And of course, the boys get to watch it. And again, it sort of deepens their fascination.
Yeah.
Seeing her act out in such an extreme way.
Yeah, they're like commenting, like comparing one to the other. Like, man, he was a lot faster than the guy last night. Huh? Stuff like that.
Makes you wonder how she's even getting these guys. They say something like one of them, like, he still has this uniform on from some like place he works. I'm like, I didn't even know she was allowed to go out there. I thought she wasn't allowed to go there, but you know.
Like the burger joint.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Maybe like a note. I don't know. Passed a note. Well, I mean, she does have a telephone, so.
Yeah, and that's how, towards the end, they eventually start communicating. It's just through the phone. Although, again, it's interesting because it shows like there's, even when you have a direct line, they still communicate indirectly because they just start playing records to each other.
Right. It's kind of nice.
Oh yeah. I did something similar when I was in grade 9, and we did the French. I can't remember which trip it was because I did both. I was a spoiled kid. I got to do both because there was the French trip, and then there was also the band trip, and I went on both. And I remember there were just some nights in the hotels where, like, I remember boys in the room, we would call the girls on the phones, and we would do stuff like that.
Yeah. Like innocent stuff.
Yeah, pretty innocent. Nowadays, they're, I don't know, sexting and...
Oh, I know.
And show your tits and stuff.
Already. Yeah, let me see your tits.
Yeah. Because, I mean, I had all those sexual thoughts when I was that age, too, but I just would never have occurred to me to be so overt about it. Like,
I feel like girls wouldn't have done it then, too. Like,
I hope not. That's the other thing. Like, sometimes, you hear these horror stories about, like, they've got a daughter who's like 12 or 13, and you're finding out, like, the boys at her school are like pressuring her to like send like topless pics and stuff like that. I'm like, I couldn't imagine like doing that if I had the technology. I still wouldn't be like, oh yeah, you're not cool if you don't send me topless pics. Like, what the hell, man?
But I mean, let's say, you're in a committed relationship with someone you do love. I mean, what's to say it doesn't get, intercepted by a third party one way or another, hacked or whatever.
Yeah.
They can hack the cloud.
Everybody gets hacked. Look at it's happened to like dozens of celebrities. How many celebrities have we seen naked because their own stuff got hacked?
And it's even like, you could delete that shit and it's still out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, don't do that, girls. And well, boys too, I guess, but
yeah.
It's not going to be as much of a social stigma on boys.
No.
They're like, boys will be boys, right? Slinging their dicks around everywhere. That's kind of the way we look at it, right?
Yeah.
A girl sleeps with 3 guys, she's a whore. But if a guy sleeps with 3 girls, he's a pillar of the community. Yeah, stud.
It's awesome. Yeah, some things, even in all this time changes, but some things stay the same, unfortunately.
Yeah. Even just having big breasts means you're a slut, even if you don't do anything with anyone.
Yeah. As I've talked about on the show before, like I do actually feel a certain amount of not pity exactly, but I do feel for like girls that have like big breasts, because especially when they were younger, because it suddenly makes them seem like more adult, and it's like, oh, there's something perverted about you. No, it's just their body, but and they didn't ask for it. It's who they, But yeah. As I said, in a way, it's gotten to a point where they won't see themselves represented in really any positive way. Because if, let's say, the next Disney movie comes out, if they made like the next Disney princess have a big rack, everybody would just be like, what the fuck is wrong with Disney? What the hell are you doing, you disgusting animators?
Yeah, but I mean, there are women that have large breasts.
What's that?
I mean, there are women that have large breasts.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. But women with large breasts would only see themselves represented as sexual objects. That's what I'm saying. You're not going to see you're not going to see a Disney princess with like a big rack, because everybody would just accuse the animators and the writers and stuff of being sick bastards, even though, young women or young girls can have large breasts, but they know we can't, put that in that sort of thing because it's not wholesome. So it kind of teaches young girls, if they have large breasts, you're not wholesome, you're dirty. It's pretty fucked up.
But you're also not going to see a Disney princess that's ugly or maybe more normal looking. They've always got to be like, extremely beautiful.
Yeah. So there's the double standard there, right?
Right.
They can be pretty, but we can't make them this or that, or it'll be
They can't
overtly
not be
sexual.
pretty.
Yeah, but they can't be not. Yeah, exactly. So, as you said, it's pretty lose-lose. But as I said, yeah, I mean, people talk about how easy it is for like girls with big breasts. I guess in some ways, but who wants to just be judged by some physical thing? And again, everybody just attaches a stigma to it. It's always, some sort of sexual thing. The only way you'll see yourself represented is through like sex objects or ditzes or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, most know that they can use it in their advantage. So more power to them.
Sure. But again, a lot, I'm sure just as many don't want to be defined by that. They want to be a scientist. They want to be this or that. And the breast shouldn't have anything to do with it. But the fact is, they're there. People see them, and people make their judgments. So.
Yeah, well, people are going to judge regardless.
Yeah. People like Graham Fuller. You're uncommonly perverse. But yeah, I'm trying to think more about the boys themselves. Because again, the focus is on the girls, but the focus is indirect because it's through the boys on the girls and their fascination with the girls. But it's pretty relatable stuff, I think, at least to a guy to think, yeah, if I was in the situation, I'd probably be one of the ones who is fascinated. Mm-hmm. And you really do see that, well, like one of the last things they say towards the end of the movie is, it'd be great to feel one of them up just once because, they're boys. But at the same time, they really do want to do something good. Because at the end, they want to rescue them. They think it's going to be a rescue. And I would have been totally all in for that. I was like, yeah, fuck what my parents think. We'll take the car and get these girls out of here. They're trapped and they're upset. I'd be all for it.
Yeah, they've almost like put them on such a high pedestal. There's no way any real woman could ever live up to that. And I think they even say something to that effect. The narrator that no like normal woman would ever work or as wives or whatever. It says something like that.
Yeah. You can also see how something like an experience like that would sort of like distort your view of like girls and women, kind of in a way. If that was something that like you went through in your life, in a way, it would kind of make most girls, by comparison, seem bland and uninteresting.
Mm-hmm.
Because in your youth, you had known these mysterious, beautiful girls that were kept from the world, and then all committed suicide, never grew old or ugly or unattractive. They all died in their sort of pure state, if you want to call it. So I think it would probably make, and that's one of the reasons why these men who are now middle-aged, like it only hints at it, but they haven't really been able to move on with their lives because of this experience. It's always there.
Well, and those boys, the ones that lived across the street or whatever, like they didn't actually know them as people either. They only knew of them and what their fantasies were of them. So
yeah, and then they tried to get to know them, and they did in a way, but again, it was a really weird, indirect way, and it's not the way that it would normally happen. So again, it makes it much more fantastical and unreal, even when they're trying to genuinely know them. Like they talk about intercepting their mail and finding out about how like the catalogs the girls get. So they started getting the same ones, and they'd be like, to understand them, they would just read the same things the girl read, even if it was stuff that normally wouldn't interest boys. Which is something that reminds me of growing up and reading books of my sisters that were like for girls and about girls. Like that was just normal for me. And as I got older, it even got a little bit titillating. I remember there's this author named Phyllis Reynolds Naylor, and she wrote these series of books about a girl named Alice. Alice in all the titles starts when Alice is about 10 or 11, and I can't remember how long they go, but I read a lot of them as they get older. And there's parts in the books, where there's stuff about puberty and boys and stuff. And I was always very interested reading sort of the girl's point of view on it. I always found that very interesting. She had like these two girlfriends, and they'd have like sleepovers, and I kind of felt like I was on a sleepover with girls, which was sort of exciting. It was just a book, but it was like a different sort of perspective, and I found it kind of interesting and exciting. So Imagine that, and that was a book. So imagine being able to view that like through actual girls. I mean, it's not exactly the same because the girls weren't sharing necessarily intimate things with the boys, although they got some of it from the diary.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I could totally relate to that. I did similar things, but I know you're a little closer in age with your sister than I was with mine. So I didn't get to necessarily have that aspect. But at school and stuff, I would read some of that stuff. I know I read it was like a Beverly Hills 90210, like right when that show first came out, like they put out like I don't even know what it really was. I mean, just like, something like that. So really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
This was like right when the show came out. So
yeah, the Alice books are the best example I have from like that sort of like girly growing up perspective. But there's other, I read the Babysitter's Club books.
Yeah.
I read some Sweet Valley High, but I lost interest in those because they were just so frilly and girly. They didn't really have any substance. But yeah, I read a lot of that stuff and was always very interested in it.
Did the Sweet Valley High, was that twins? The twin sisters in that?
Yeah.
So that's the show. They made a show out of that.
I believe so.
Like similar to like Saved by the Bell.
Yeah, I think so.
And it had, I don't know if it was actual twins or just one girl played both parts. I don't remember. I think they were twins.
I probably saw some of the show. I just don't remember now.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. It wasn't great.
But no, well, the books weren't great, so
obvious ripoff.
Yeah,
I mean,
they didn't really have strong source material to go with anyway.
Oh, I remember what it was. One of the girls was. Remember Joe Dirt? Did you ever see that?
I know the movie, but I didn't actually see it. That's David Spade. The girl. Yeah.
I'll tell you her name real quick. Brittany Daniel. I think she has a twin sister.
I know the name.
That they were both in that show.
Oh yeah.
So before she really messed herself up with plastic surgery, she was pretty attractive.
Yeah, another one that did that.
Yeah, it's pretty much par for the course.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah. I heard what's the woman from Fargo? I can't think of names right now. Married to one of the Coen brothers.
Yeah, I know who you mean. Can't think of her name either.
Frances McDormand. But
I'm a lot worse at actresses' names than actors.
Yeah, man. Sometimes I can do it better than others, but not tonight. But I saw a quote from her recently that she didn't ever have any work done because she was like, look, when we get older, who's going to be able to play the older parts, because everybody's fucked their faces up so they don't look like they're old,
Worked out for her. She's played a lot of prominent roles as a middle-aged woman.
Yeah, and older than middle age. 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri was pretty good.
Yeah, I saw that. Wasn't bad.
She was kind of like a raving lunatic for most of the movie, but an naturally older looking raving lunatic. Yeah. But that made a lot of sense to me, like, Meryl Streep, say what you want about her, but I mean, she looks her age, appropriately. She may have had some work done here and there, but nothing drastic.
Yeah. But as we said, she was never a great beauty, even in her prime, so she did probably feel exactly the same pressure. In a way, she had a certain amount of security from that because she kind of knew that like her casting was really more due to her talent than any sort of look she had. Whereas a lot of these other actresses would have to second guess themselves. I'm not saying they weren't talented actresses, but you still have to think their looks were a big part of some of the roles they got, which I'm not judging them for or anything like that. That's really just the reality of how Hollywood works in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're cast as the bombshell, once those days wear off, you're the mom,
Right. But in the case of somebody like Meryl Streep goes, she knows she was always sort of just, a really strong actress that was more about her performance than her looks. So she probably always kind of had that security as she got older that her roles would change, but they wouldn't change that much. And she would still get to do a lot of the challenging stuff she liked to do. I don't know. Maybe I'm sure I can't think of an example, but that's probably been maybe a beneficial thing for some of these actresses that maybe once they got older, they finally got to be taken a little more seriously as actors,
Yeah.
and not just a pretty face or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to
I
talk about Kirsten Dunst. I've never really known how to. It's weird. There's another '90s girl like her that I used to love, and I think they're kind of similar in that they both seem so beautiful to me in their teens. And this is just me, being picky or whatever. Doesn't matter. But the way they aged almost didn't really live up to the way they looked then. Because usually it's kind of the different. Like you look at Scarlett Johansson in her teens, and you see she was a pretty girl, but then she emerged into her 20s. She's like kind of like this bombshell.
Yeah.
But it was kind of different for somebody like Kirsten Dunst. And the other one is shit. Oh man, what is wrong with me? Romeo and Juliet.
Oh, Claire Danes.
Claire Danes. And that I think both Kirsten Dunst and Claire Danes were very beautiful teens that never kind of lived up to it as they got older. Like they were attractive women, but I don't think they had the same aura of beauty as they got older. I don't know. I mean, they're both okay actresses and have gone on to do good things, but
Yeah.
you know how you always picture, whether it's even if it's an actor or an actress, sometimes you kind of always picture them in one way. Like whenever I picture Kirsten Dunst, I picture her kind of in this movie. I don't picture her older.
You don't picture the Spider-Man?
No.
I mean, I almost picture her like Jumanji, like what's the Vampire Chronicles movie? Interview with the Vampire.
Oh, is that her?
Mm-hmm. It's 3 or 4 years before this.
Yeah, about 5 years.
Okay.
I probably knew that was her and forgot, but yeah, my image of Kirsten Dunst is the way she looked in this movie, and she was only 16 in this movie. Kind of like my image of Brad Pitt is the same year. It's Fight Club, which is '99. Like to me, like that's Brad Pitt. I mean, obviously he's gotten older and looks a little different now, and as
but again,
a man,
men get that pass though. I mean, I think men can age gracefully.
Oh yeah, for sure. Again, I'm not necessarily talking about even attractiveness. I'm just sort of talking about their look, just the way I think of them.
Yeah,
it's kind of what
like 12 Monkeys.
Yeah,
12 Monkeys Fight Club. Yeah, I got you.
That kind of thing.
That's a good time for him. Made lots of good movies around that time.
Yeah.
He has a new one out, by the way. I haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, space one.
Yeah, so that's kind of why I was immediately
Ad Astra, something like that. Yeah, I'm just not in the mood. I'm just not in the mood for a space movie right now. I don't know why.
I saw Matt Damon do it. I saw Matthew McConaughey do it. I don't want to.
Yeah, I know. Interstellar is one of those movies that I really want to like, but I can't. Like, there's a lot of good things about it, but
I feel like it's a well-made movie. I just don't like it.
Yeah, don't like it.
I'm right there with you. That's Nolan, right?
Yeah. It's Nolan, probably his most self-indulgent. Although then again, I haven't seen the other Inception. That might be even more self-indulgent, so I'm not sure.
Inception's kind of the same way. It's one I feel like I should like, but I don't really. It's not one I'm going to ever go back and watch again. You know, it's got great action sequences and great actors, and it's well made and everything. It's just not something I want to see again.
It's interesting that both those movies have like graphics of like rotating buildings and stuff, like how they work in. I mean, two vastly different movies, but somehow those visuals find their way into both.
What did you think of Shutter Island? Just since we're on the Nolan,
super disappointed, just because I really enjoyed the ride, but then the twist kind of ruined it. I wanted it all to be real. I didn't want it to be some guy's delusion. That ruined it for me. I was like,
I feel the same way about all three of those. Really,
I was really invested in the story and thought it was interesting, and then they just undercut it by saying, "Oh, actually, he's just one of the inmates on a delusion." I was like, "Oh, like I wanted there to be a big, I wanted a mystery. I like mysteries, and it's like there is no mystery.
It's
an entertaining movie, but
yeah."
I was super excited about it. Like when there were previews for it, I was like, "Oh, I'm definitely seeing this." Like I saw that in theaters and disappointed, but yeah, I wouldn't mind watching it again sometime. Even though, I don't think I'm going to suddenly like it more.
It's not really worth it's like 3 hours long, 2.5, 3 hours.
It's pretty long.
Yeah. See, like this movie, it was like a solid like 90 minutes, right? That's a great runtime for this. It plays, no pacing problems at all. It flows great. It
Yeah.
comes in, tells its story, and it's out.
And it really is actually very faithful to the book.
Mm.
I mean, it only eliminates details here and there, but for the most part, but on the same tack, since we're talking about some of the current things, so now we've both seen It Chapter 2, and I'm going to say I liked it more than I was expecting to like it, which sounds kind of weird because I actually really liked the first chapter, It. So why was I like thinking not to like it? It had nothing to do with the movie necessarily. It's because like it's one of my favorite Stephen King books, but I was always less interested in the adult story. I thought the kid story was really what was strong. The adult story was less interesting. And my main problems with the Chapter 1 movie were some of the changes they made from the book that just seemed pointless. We talked about it before. It's like, why did you do that? Like, what I have to say is some of the strengths of the Chapter 2 for me was the changes they made. I thought they made changes for the better from the book.
Mike was Mike again, right?
That's true too.
Ben wasn't playing Mike's role.
That's true too. But actually, I was really happy with the changes they made from the book, or I thought strengthened it, because I think the book gets a little muddled, because there's this whole thing about Bev's abusive husband coming after her to kill her. That's cut out, which I think is fine. Yeah. The same thing. There's the whole thing about Bill's own wife getting worried about him, come looking for him. She winds up looking into the dead lights and going catatonic. And the way the book actually ends is like him breaking her out of her catatonic state by taking for a ride on Silver. I always thought that was stupid. So again, I think that's fine that that's removed. So I thought that was smart that they removed those kind of clunky things.
Yeah, I was wondering what they were going to do with that, but yeah, I agree. It's a lot going on in the book. It's a lot going on in the book too to keep everything straight. So I think that was a good idea.
Yeah. I didn't think. Yeah, I thought it actually benefited from not having those added complications of those characters coming into it. And with Bev's, it really adds nothing because, like, I don't even know if he sees her. I think it just kills him at some point. Like he's just some rich asshole that's using his money so he can get down there, so he can kill her or do whatever or drag her back where he's going to do. And then he like winds up meeting It, and It kills him or something. It all kind of goes nowhere.
But, and you were asking about the bully that dies at the end of the first one. So he's obviously back.
Yeah, so that was the thing. I thought, like, in the first one that I was so confused about, was like, it looks like they killed Henry, but luckily they didn't, because that would have posed a huge problem. They would have had to make really big changes, because Henry coming back is a really important part that I don't think you could cut. It is important.
And they pretty much played it just like the book, and I like that.
Yeah,
how Hofstadter's like up under his bed at one point. That was a good scene.
Yeah, and actually that was something they did to make it a little different and simplify, because, like, what is it? Hofstadter actually shows up in a car and drives him, right?
Yeah.
In the book, there's nobody driving the car. It's Christine. Christine actually shows up and drives him. It's a little crossover action there, but, there's not much point in doing that in the movie when there's no Christine in this reality. So I thought that was fine, yeah. I mean, they changed Hofstadter's character in the first one, but I get that. They had to simplify things a little. But it's one of the things I liked about the book, though. Not that I'm saying they had to do it for the movie. It was cool, though. Like, Henry had his own sort of gang of bullies. Hofstadter was separate. He was a different kind of bully, and he was really crazy. And they don't have that in that. He's just a bully. But in the book, he's legitimately crazy.
Yeah, I wish they'd kept the homosexual stuff in there with them, too.
Oh, yeah, there's a part where, like, he, like, jerks them off or something.
Yeah.
Or jerks one of them off.
And then he gets mad when he like, likes it or whatever.
Yeah. Bev watches, and it's like, Bev's like, this is a weird time to like be the first time I see penises.
Yeah, man, what a great book.
Yeah, I really like the book. And here's something, though. I didn't really, like, there's a few times we've talked about this, and I know we talked with our friend Eric, too. We talk about how we like Stephen King most of the time and a lot of stuff, but it seems like he has problems with endings. I guess that's a really widespread thing, because apparently they talk about it in the book, because the joke is that Bill's character can't end books properly. Yeah. And then there's a part where he's talking to Stephen King, and Stephen King's like, your endings suck, or something like that. And I'm like, I had no idea that apparently people say this to Stephen King. I thought it was just something that maybe a few of us thought. Apparently, it's what everybody thinks, that Stephen King is a good writer and his endings suck.
That's cool of him to be a sport about it, though.
Yeah, he's acknowledging it, yeah. Because, I mean, even in my favorite book by him, The Stand, like, what's the worst part about The Stand? Well, the ending kind of just sort of peters out, you know? And that's how I feel about, like, a lot of his things. And sometimes I feel like he doesn't know how to end things, so he just blows things up. Like, that's how Under the Dome ends. It's like, I don't know what to do. Everything explodes. You know? There, that clears things out. But yeah, so I mean, that was something I always privately felt, and something I talked to some people like you and Ryan and people said. I didn't know it was that widespread. I don't know. I don't know how I was insulated from it, but I'd never been on like message boards or seen people online really saying like Stephen King, you know, his endings kind of suck. But apparently that's like the general consensus among the public, and they just decide to acknowledge it in this movie, which I thought was funny.
Yeah.
And like you said, Stephen King's got a good attitude about it. He's like, okay, whatever.
You know, there's a Dr. Sleep movie coming out soon. Yeah. You haven't read that yet, have you?
No, the sequel to The Shining. I was never a big Shining fan of the book or the movie.
Yeah,
so
I'm the same. But anyway, I was going to say that the Mike character is in Dr. Sleep. I was thinking, how cool would it have been if they got the same actor as from It Chapter 2, but of course they don't.
Oh.
Wouldn't that have been nice?
That's interesting. Because I don't know do you remember what the actual in the book connection is?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I'll tell you. So when you're reading in the book, remember, this is the other thing that's too bad. Like, they only mention them very briefly, but they don't do flashbacks about them. They talk about the other times that it showed up, and sometimes there were various, you know, catastrophes or whatever. And they changed some of the dates too, because they say in the movies, they say like the black spot burned down in like 1962. Well, the black spot actually burned down sometime during, I think, like a World War II or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, it's all about the black spot. The black spot was this little unofficial bar for the black soldiers. There was like an army base. There was an army base outside the town, and the black soldiers, of course, were very segregated from the rest of the army, and they were you know, discriminated against and stuff like that. And they weren't allowed to go to like the army bar. So they made their own bar called the Black Spot, which actually became very popular and had like jazz and stuff. And what happened is one night, some group of like white supremacists who were influenced by Pennywise went and burned the place down and killed a bunch of them. Anyway, during that flashback, there's this whole thing. I'm pretty sure Ben or somebody actually talks to one of the survivors who remembers the night. And what he says is, you know, the place was burning down, fire, walls are coming down, the doors, everybody ran to the doors, and there's no way out. One of his other soldiers led him out. And even though it was all smoke, he couldn't see anything. He's like, how do you know? And he says, I just know. The guy that said, I just know, is the guy who many decades later would work at the Overlook Hotel, the black guy with The Shining. So that's the connection there.
And how do you know that? You just from...
Because he has the same name.
Okay.
That's the only way you know.
Really cool, actually.
Yeah. So, and yeah. So
that was one of the problems I had about the first movie is I liked that story so much. I mean, you know, Mike is my favorite character, and they really left a lot of his story out. Yeah. And I think the second movie makes up for it a little bit, but...
Yeah. Like, well, they invent this whole thing about his parents burning to death, which is not in the book at all.
I guess that's kind of a nod to the Black Spot.
Which is kind of a nod to the Black Spot, yeah, this idea.
They weren't drug addicts or alcoholics or whatever they said they were, which, you know, is kind of unfortunate because that just wasn't the case. It was, you know, against type for what people would consider, you know, African Americans around that time. You know, they were like really good people, which is it was, you know, Henry's dad that was the asshole, and he wasn't a cop either.
No. That was, again, a change I really didn't like. I was like, what? Because, I mean, the point was, like, yeah, in the movie, they have Henry's dad is an asshole, but he's also a cop, which actually gives him a bit of respectability in the community. In the book, his dad is just is like the town crazy, you know, that rants and raves, and his main thing is, like, he has all this hatred, but his main hatred he blames on the black family because he's super racist. Like, everything is the black people's fault. And stuff like that.
Well, he's jealous of their success too, I think.
Yeah, and the fact, yeah. And he projects that onto Henry. So as much as Henry hates the losers, he hates Mike the most of all because he's racist. And
But I mean, all the race stuff I thought was one of the stronger parts of the book, and
they had to sweep that kind of under the rug in this.
But I don't know why they did though. I mean, that would have been so easy to do. I mean, why make him a cop? That's stupid. That almost makes him look like an upstanding citizen or something.
I thought that was really stupid too, and it just seemed pointless. But as I said, so there were changes from the book in the first thing that I didn't like, but in the second one, I thought the changes were actually good. So that's why I was actually pleasantly surprised and enjoyed the second part more than I thought I would. And the adult actors are pretty good. You can see the correlation between the kid actors and them. They made an obvious attempt to show like this is the same person grown up. The only one I didn't like was Ben. Of course, everybody knows it is true that Ben, when he grew up, he wasn't fat anymore and he was actually tall and handsome. But I just didn't like the guy. Didn't like him.
I didn't either. I didn't like him either.
Yeah. So in the first one, the kid actor I didn't care for was Bev. In this one, I didn't care for. In the adult actor, I didn't care for Ben. But the rest, all pretty good casting.
I didn't have a problem with Bev in the first one.
A lot of people seem fine with Bev. I just thought she was too tomboyish, and I don't know.
She cut all her hair off, yeah.
Yeah, and they had that too. And she just seemed way too like comfortable and confident all the time. She wasn't really like that in the book.
Yeah, that's true.
Like her interactions with Ben are really different from in the book, because she's like, "Hey, new kid," blah 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 blah. Like she's not really like that in the book. But anyway.
Well, they play up the New Kids on the Block.
I'm fine with that. They changed the era. Give something embarrassing for Ben. I'm fine with that. Because I liked the New Kids on the Block when I was about that age too, I think. Well, maybe a little younger. I was like 8 or 9. I was 7, 8, 9 when I liked the New Kids on the Block. I saw them I saw them at the height of their fame. I saw them in Ottawa in the summer of 1990. That was during their step-by-step tour when they were going to like massive, massive arenas. I don't remember the concert. I only remember before the concert because it got delayed because it was like half rain. Even though it was like summer, it was like really cold rain. It was messing everything up. And all I can remember is like there was this huge delay, but like at one point while the techs were out there working, 2 of them came. I don't remember which 2. 2 of them came out and started like showing off for the crowd. They were like jumping up on the railing and stuff, and all the girls were going ah and stuff like. I remember that, but I don't remember like the actual concert and the songs.
That sounds like a Donnie. It sounds like a Donnie thing.
I'm sure he was one of the 2. But yeah, there were 2 of them. My favorite one was Joe because he was the youngest. I liked him because I thought I could do what Joe does.
All the girls that I knew liked Joe too because he was the youngest.
Yeah. What made me happy about the second movie also was that it had more kid stuff. It flashed back and showed some of the stuff that happened that summer that we didn't see in the first movie. Because I did wonder, how are you going to fill this up? Because the adult story is kind of thin. Well, they filled it up by adding more kid stuff, which I was fine with because I like that more. And I was really happy because they had another part with the new kids, and they played when I was a kid, my favorite New Kids song was Cover Girl. So there's Cover Girl, which made its way into the movie. That was my favorite New Kids song. It was just so catchy.
Don't run away, girl.
She's my cover girl. Oh, 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 oh. I really like that song. I remember I used to play it a lot on the tape.
But yeah, the reason why, like, I was the same way. I had my expectations fairly low just because I heard so much negative.
Really?
And I mean, yeah, I know it's 3 hours or whatever, but I mean, it's a lot of story to tell.
It's a lot of story. I think it's solid.
I feel like maybe they could have cut a little bit out of the ending because it did seem kind of repetitive over and over again. But other than that, I mean, they hit my favorite parts of the adult stories. So
yeah, I mean, you put those 2 movies together because again, it's not a sequel; it's just the second part. I think it's really solid and one of the best Stephen King adaptations there is. Like real quality was put into it. I mean, you can say what you want about some, but they were cheap and crappy. Like look at the mini series. It has some things I like, but at the end of the day, it's cheesy and dumb and lame and not at all scary. I'm not going to say, oh, we watched this movie, it'll scare you, but at least they tried.
People have come out lately defending that miniseries. Like,
I can enjoy it, but I mean, it's so watered down. It's a joke. Like people who enjoy the miniseries never read the book because like it's just so. And I mean, I get it. They were limited by what they had to do. Like, like everything's just so. I mean, it is very dark. It's very dark and violent and disturbing, and none of that comes across in the miniseries. None of it.
Oh, because it was made for TV. I mean, you can't do any of that stuff.
Yeah,
but I've got a little bit of nostalgia love for it, because I did watch it, when it came on.
Yeah, same here.
And,
It's more like some nostalgia because I saw it when I was very young.
I like seeing
I saw it before I read the book.
Jonathan Brandis. I like seeing
Seth Green.
Oh fuck, I forgot he was in there. Yeah, Seth Green and the older guy that died a few years ago.
Yeah, I thought that's what you
One
were
of
going
the
to say.
adult
John
Ritter.
John Ritter was Ben.
Oh, okay. I couldn't
His
even remember.
dialogue was so like, man, they had some bad dialogue.
It was just bad. It was bad all around.
Remember like his introductory scene where he's like, he brings the girl back to his apartment. She's like, "Would you believe I was fat when I was a kid?" She's like, "No." He's like, "Yeah, I was a real porker." And he said all this stuff. She's like, "Oh, I bet you were cute." And he's like, "FAT. Yep, that was me." Like, oh my god.
Yeah, but John Ritter was always kind of a heavyset guy. I mean, at that point, he was kind of a fat guy, wasn't he? Like,
Not
yeah,
really.
of course I can believe it. You're kind of fat now. Like,
Maybe a little baby fat doughiness, but not fat. But just,
well, not
it's
huge,
really embarrassing dialogue. Is my point. Like,
yeah.
you're trying to seduce this woman, and you're going to talk about how you were fat when you were a kid, and she's all getting into it like she's turned on. I'm like, what the hell, man?
Oh yeah, tell me about
I mean,
it.
bet your fern.
It's just bad. It's bad.
Which I think is from the book.
I mean, bad miniseries.
Yeah. But yeah, I feel like people that like the miniseries are remembering it from a long time ago with some nostalgia and maybe just never read the book because it's a travesty compared to the book.
I mean, maybe if you watched it in 2 sittings, maybe it would play a little better, but it bores the tears out of me, man. I'm not doing it again. I'm not going to watch it again so I can talk shit about it. So
the only thing I like about the miniseries compared to the movie is I like the fact that they actually showed them like working on the dam because that's always been one of my favorite parts of the book because it reminds me of my own childhood because we had because we didn't have the Barrens, but we had an area down at the end of my street with the brook. And that was something we always played around the brook. And one of the things we like to do is try to dam it. So it reminded me a lot of that. I never understood why in the first book they tried to change people's motivations around. It didn't like the story still works the way it works, but they moved it around because the idea is supposed to be Bill is very upset, of course, that he lost Georgie, and he's not like over it by any means, but he's trying to move on with his life, and he's just playing with his friends. But in the movie, they're like, no, he can't accept that he's gone, and for some reason, they never found the body, even though he in this and they're like, he's trying to find him, so he drags them down to the Barrens to look. It's like that isn't needed. They're just playing at the Barrens.
yeah,
and then the whole thing again of Bev being kidnapped. No, they went down there they got chased by Henry and his goons. That's why they wound up down there. But in this, it turns into a rescue mission because it kidnapped Bev. And it turns Bev into a damsel in distress, which I think is a disservice to her character because in the other thing, she bravely storms the sewers with the rest of them. She's not a captive. Mm-hmm. So those were 2 really weird narrative choices that annoyed me. Still, I mean, I'm nitpicking because I still really like the first part and the second part. I own the first part, so I'll probably own the second part at some point too, because I think it really goes together as some really quality work, and finally something that actually shows what Stephen King had written to a certain extent. And again, things changed and updated, but it still fits still has the same spirit. Like all the dialogue between like Eddie and Richie is updated and different, but it's good. It works. And yeah, Bill Hader's pretty good. I always like Bill Hader. I'm a fan of him anyway. Did you see
Let me ask you this.
His favorite films? I think I put it on Twitter at some point. I read some article where he had like a list of his favorite films. He's quite the film guy, I have to say.
Yeah.
A lot of classic stuff in there.
Was it like a Criterion Collection thing, maybe?
Yeah, probably. Because there was a lot of those sorts of movies. By the way, this movie, The Virgin Suicides, has a Criterion Collection release. I would like to get it. So maybe someday.
Anyway, I was going to mention some more stuff about it, but we don't need to go there. That's not what we're talking about. But, well, just real quick, I wanted to ask you this. As I asked Eric this before you had seen it, and I was just trying to see if I missed something. Like, there was never any indication that Richie was gay in the book, right?
No.
Okay, so that was completely for this
I'm fine with. I mean, it's okay. You don't need it, but it's not like one of those really annoying changes either. It's fine. But yeah, they had this whole thing about like Richie, like what was it, playing like Street Fighter with Henry's cousin?
Yeah.
Like, you trying to fuck my cousin or something? Like, okay, fine, I guess. It's almost like they thought, like, we can't have like the racism, but we can have homophobia. I don't know.
I don't know why you can't have the racism though. I mean, it's.
I mean, they're both showing things that were bad.
It's running wild like
bad,
everywhere.
racism's bad, homophobia is bad. I don't know. And it's probably on the same vein for people who haven't read the book. Maybe they think that opening scene with like the gay couple getting attacked was added to be woke, but it wasn't. That's from the book.
That was in the book.
In 1982.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite faithful. I was surprised. I kept waiting for something to diverge and change, but it's very similar. The only thing is they don't show the cops later. In the book, you get some more of that where the cops are shown to be super homophobic too.
Yeah.
They're just like, it's like, I hate there's like bum fairies, or the call them too. It's like, I hate them too, but I do draw the line at murder, is basically what the cop says. Like, he's like, I don't like the gays either, but I don't think you should kill them. They don't have the cop stuff in this, and that's fine. I don't care. But yeah, that is in the book.
Yeah, I like that part a lot when he like bites off like the entire like shoulder blade of that guy.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, they added some of this other stuff, but that actually was in the book, that entire scene there.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're supposed to believe those boys were, basically directed by Pennywise or whatever, right? Their hatred was.
Yeah. The idea is that they were probably jerks anyway, but it gets ramped up. Like he just influences everything and makes it worse. That's the idea.
The way like Henry stabs his dad.
Yeah, same thing. Like they might have just yelled at them, be like, "Hey, fags!" But Pennywise's influence makes them like decide, "Yeah, we're gonna beat the shit out of them," like kind of thing. Same thing with like the black spot and other stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to like ramp up people's hatred. It's pretty cool. But yeah, I was happy with it. It was good to see something in the theater. It was a pretty lean summer for me, so I only got to see something. And yeah, I asked you about it. You saw the same preview for the Black Christmas. As usual, like I wasn't gonna go see it anyway because I don't care. Like I hated the last remake, and I don't know why they even drag the name into it because I don't know. I'm one of those people that says remakes don't hurt the original, and I shouldn't. And I believe that, but the original Black Christmas is one of my favorite movies. I just love that movie so much. So it just kind of bothers me to think people going to see Black Christmas, but it's not the right one. It's not the real one.
Well, but, I mean, it looks like a shitty movie. It was also a terrible trailer.
I was just going to say, it's another one of those trailers that gives everything away.
Gives everything away. Why go see it? I mean, we know that it was the fraternity that did it. I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, here's big spoilers for people. It makes it pretty clear that it's not one lone killer. It makes it pretty clear that it's obviously some sort of group. And as you said, well, what group's around there? Fraternity. Well, duh. So it's obviously some sort of like weird ancient tradition of this dumb fraternity. Like, I mean, it's all given away in this preview.
I mean, if it's spoiled in the preview, we're not spoiling anything.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I just mean, yeah, like one of the things of this movie, like that could have been like an impetus, might have been motivation to see it is like it might be a bit of a mystery. Who is the killer? What's behind it? It's like, here, we'll tell you in the preview. Ridiculous. Like I couldn't believe it. I even had my eyes closed for parts of it, and it didn't help. I still knew.
It's almost like it wasn't a Black Christmas movie. They just tacked that title onto it.
Yeah.
And made it,
It really annoys me. I mean,
it happens all the time.
It's a remake in the loosest term. It's the title, and yeah, people are getting killed on a college campus. Everything else is different, and you can say, well, that's good. They're adding something new, but I don't give a shit. If you're going to do that, don't tread on the name.
But I mean, like if you're not like a horror aficionado, you probably don't know what Black Christmas is. You know what Halloween is, but you don't know that its predecessor was Black Christmas.
I know. I mean, even I didn't know Black Christmas till I was, a bit older. I didn't know Black Christmas growing up.
But I mean, what's the name recognition now? Oh, you remember that movie they did in like 2005?
Remember that movie with Michelle Trachtenberg?
Yeah. Remember Lacey Chabert was in that movie?
Fucking hate that movie.
I like a lot of the actresses in it.
Oh yeah, very attractive actresses. I used to have a big crush on Michelle Trachtenberg back then.
Mm-hmm.
I was really into her.
I was in the Buffy days.
And I didn't even watch Buffy. It's funny. I loved her and Sarah Michelle Gellar, and I never watched that show.
Oh, really?
Not like I don't have any opinion on it. It's whatever. But no, just wasn't much of a TV watcher in that way. As I've said many times, I watch TV, but I was never really like a drama person. I basically just watched like cartoons and hockey.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some exceptions over the years, for sure. But I'm trying to think of some of the other things worth pointing out about Virgin Suicides. I mean, it's a very poetic type of book and movie, and I think it's successful as a movie in the transition, and that it really retains a lot of that style and feel. Some of it's not too hard to do. You just sort of take what was on the page and put in the book. Like there's some allegories going on, which are kind of cool. Like the idea, of course, this is Michigan in the 70s, and the audio industry is dying. Well, so the town is dying. How can we ramp that up? There's also this thing where like trees are dying.
I was about to mention that, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got the town is dying, this death, the trees are dying, and when girls die, the town is completely dead.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the death of the town, basically, because these girls were kind of like this shining beacon sort of hope or innocence, and once they're gone, the whole thing's extinguished, and it's all a very interesting ending with this idea of like these upper class people having this weird debutante party.
That was really weird. I mean, whatever they were doing with the lighting and it just felt swampy, you know?
Yeah. Well, the lighting wasn't just the lighting. It was like the town was permeated by some sort of like weird like fog, like some polluted fog, and they were like, let's just embrace it and have an asphyxiation party with gas masks and stuff like that.
It smelled bad, right? For some reason.
Yeah. Something to do with like pollution or something.
Is any of that real? I mean, I'm sure the tree disease was real. I mean, the writer's from Michigan, so I'm sure it probably was real. But
and the idea, of course, is how the community is supposed to go forward like nothing happened, and the adults. There's even a part. It was actually kind of funny of the adult mocking it. Where he's like, "Goodbye, cruel world," and he throws himself into the. That
pool. Was a bit much, man. Yeah.
He's like, "You don't understand me. I'm a teenager," or something. It's like, "I'm a teenager. I'm so depressed."
I don't think anyone would laugh at that. I mean,
it's a bit much considering what had happened.
I mean, and you're at a debutante ball, like.
I know, it's about young people.
That like it just happened. Like 5 girls just killed themselves.
Yeah.
Sisters.
I'm a teenager. I killed myself.
You got some rich asshole trying to be the jerk or the the clown of the party.
The one part where the movie diverges from the book, and again, I don't think it's that important, is when the final suicides happen. In the book, one of them, I think it's Mary, the one who stuck her head in the oven, she actually and she kills herself a few months later while in the hospital. And I think it's a little bit more powerful to just have them all die at the same time, really, instead of having her linger. Because, she's in the hospital, and even though she's under close watch, gets a hold of some pills and finishes herself with pills. I think it's more powerful just to have the 4 go out together.
It definitely plays better in a film. I can see it's probably not as realistic, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of them failing at their attempts is probably more realistic, but
I think a strength of that scene too is the fact that the movie, as we said, the movie's called The Virgin Suicides. It opens fully telling the audience that they all kill themselves. It's still kind of how surprising and shocking that scene is, because even though you know it's coming, maybe you don't think it's going to happen there.
Yeah.
You think maybe something else is going to happen. Then suddenly you just see the hanging body. You don't see the head, which has been done in lots of movies, like horror movies too. But it's always very effective just to see the body with the feet down.
Yeah, man, that was disturbing. Even though you know it's coming.
Why the boys just run out.
Yeah.
They're like, one moment they're joking and talking about what they're going to do, and then suddenly this, and they almost trip over the girl in the oven. And it's only later they find out about the other ones, how they went out. One was pills, one was the oven, one was hanging. What was the other one? Maybe she.
Lux was in the car.
Lux was in the car. That's right. Yeah, it is really creepy too. How like Lux invited them in and stuff, and she's like, "I'm gonna go start the car." Like, Jesus, like suicide's morbid enough, but the way you've involved these boys in it is super morbid.
Yeah, that's all 4. Okay, cool. Yeah, man, it's almost something that you would expect to happen off screen, or maybe in the movie, and then they kill themselves or something. Like, I mean, it's really jarring. I mean, you wouldn't expect that in that type of movie to actually see.
As I said, you know that they're going to kill themselves,
Yeah.
and yet you're still pretty shocked by the scene when it happens.
It is shocking.
Yeah, obviously they had some suicide pact, and we never know when it started. Possibly as soon as after the first one killed herself, it's possible, Although I don't think so, because it seemed like they were trying to live. They were excited about going to the prom or school dance, whatever like that.
Yeah, I like how it doesn't tell you. It doesn't give you any details.
Because really, that's sort of the crux of the story, is how these boys, all these years later, still don't know. They tried so hard to figure it out, to understand these girls, and they never got to. And nobody knows why it happened. And of course, this being a small town, there's all sorts of gossip and stuff. And that's the other thing that showed in the movie early on. Right as soon as the first suicide attempt happens, we get some of the conversations of like the people gossiping, talking on the phone, saying, "I don't think she was trying to kill herself. I think," and then they're very quick to make jokes about it, right? She's like, "I think she just wanted out of that house." She's like, "I think she just wanted out of that decorating scheme." Oh, the cattiness of suburban housewives.
Yeah. But yeah, Kathleen Turner is a good choice. I like her a lot. She's almost like more well known for her older roles than she was for her, like when she was actually really popular, when she was really attractive.
Yeah, that's kind of how I think of her. It's funny when I talk about, how I think of her. True, I think of her as older. She's one of the ones I think of as older, as opposed to younger, like somebody like Kirsten Dunst.
But she's another one who made that transition pretty well, because she's still doing stuff. I mean, and she like embraces the fact that she's not what she was. But like in what is it? Peggy Sue Got Married. Like that's probably like towards the end of her lead, really attractive female. Maybe even before that. I don't remember what she looked like in that film, but around that period of time.
Yeah.
But she did like a Brian De Palma, like a real like sexy drama movie. Like,
yeah.
I don't think it wasn't that one. It was I forget the name of it. Naked something. But he did a lot of those around that time.
Looking at another one of the thing here, Roger Ebert said, Coppola has the courage to play it in a minor key. She doesn't hammer home ideas and interpretations. She is content with the air of mystery and loss that hangs in the air like bitter poignancy. I think that's pretty good summing up. Because you really do sort of feel the loss, even though it's not one of those movies that dwells on it too much. I know maybe we say this too often as if like you can't make good movies nowadays, because you can, but it almost feels like if you made this movie today, it would be a lot more melodramatic, and that there would be a lot more extra scenes trying to hammer home some of this emotional stuff.
I feel like you may get a lot of pushback because of the subject matter too.
Quite possibly, although I don't think teen suicide is any different now than it was back then. Really,
but you know how things are now. I mean, all it takes is someone to put a tweet out and it gets the movie.
Well, now it's like anytime you put anything in a movie, anything, for some reason that means you're glorifying it and you approve of it and you condone it. Like, that's ridiculous. You're just telling a story. It doesn't. You have to have conflict. Bad things have to happen. It doesn't mean I approve of these bad things. I mean, it's a story with conflict, and it's based on real life. Stuff like this happens. But yeah, nowadays you put anything like negative in a movie, it seems almost like you're in some way endorsing it, which is ridiculous. That's not what it's about.
Or 10 years ago, you put a tweet out that was sarcastic. And we don't understand what sarcasm is, so we didn't understand your joke. So we're going to take that seriously and fire you from your job.
I've never tweeted sarcastically, and I never will. And I'm nobody. I'm not a public figure. I don't even have any followers. But I'm just not going to have that come back to bite me.
I have, but I stand by what I've done.
Good for you.
I mean, I haven't done anything like what like James Gunn did. I wouldn't have the balls to do that because people wouldn't understand my sense of humor. You know, like I would do it with like you guys in like a
Exactly.
personal chat, but you know.
At least James Gunn seems to be getting back on track to a
Well,
certain extent, anyway.
they just fired that guy from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, I looked into that though. I mean, he was kind of a diversity hire in the first place.
Oh, was he?
They were kind of hiring him to basically to passive, like he didn't even do a proper audition or anything. They just hired him basically because they were concerned. They'd become concerned about people talking about like how they had like this leftist liberal bias. They were like, we need somebody that's more, the other way, and that's his name came up.
And then they found out some of that right wing stuff. He was like talking about Chinatown or something, right? And
he was calling Chinese people chinks. He was saying you're a chink Jew, and like it was strong stuff. He was calling some guy a chink Jew and stuff. And
I mean,
what's weird is they were kind of self-aware about it because they were joking about like how you should. I don't know. It was weird. I heard it. I mean, I don't know what you do with that. Like, I don't know. But what's annoying too is like I'm sick of those fake apologies. It's the same sort of BC. I'm sorry you were offended. That's not an apology. I'm sorry you were offended is not an apology.
But
it's like I'm sorry you're such a pussy.
I'm sorry you don't know what comedy is.
Yeah.
But I mean, like really though, like comedy is, it's a slippery slope. It's gonna offend people sometimes. That's the nature of it,
I know, but I mean, it's always been that way. Everybody's acting like that's something new. I mean, yeah, like the guy that did the Joker movie, I haven't seen it yet, and I don't like his comedies. But like, what was just recently? What was it? He said like he doesn't want to do comedies anymore because you can't do it because in this woke climate or something like that. I don't know. He's complaining the same way what's his name was complaining, except he's worse because at least Dave Chappelle is a comedian and it is funny, so it didn't bother as much when Dave Chappelle complained. But I was like, this guy's complaining about nothing. Like, oh, you can't make comedies anymore. I think that's great. I don't care about the fucking Hangover, so good. Don't make comedies anymore.
But I mean, Dave Chappelle is great because he can do it all. Like he talks shit about everybody, and I like that. I feel like if you can't do that, you just can't do anything.
Yeah.
But if he was a white guy, he wouldn't be able to get away with what he does, obviously. But
that's true.
I loved his new special. I thought it was the best thing he's done since the Chappelle Show.
I like parts of it, but I thought it was a little too self-righteous and whiny.
Yeah,
and that's what I feel like this director's doing now. He's whining.
Who is that?
Glass or
you said Joker?
Or Phil? Yeah, the guy that's doing Joker.
Oh, really? I'm not even sure.
Like, it's weird that he's doing Joker because he's the guy that did like Hangover movies and Old School and stuff like that.
Oh, I don't even know who that is. Well, yeah, those movies don't exist anymore.
Todd Phillips, that's his name.
Nah.
But anyway, he's been all over Twitter today because he in some interview said he wouldn't do comedy movies anymore because you can't do them anymore because people blah blah blah. I'm like, fuck off.
I'm too woke, brother.
Well, that's what he's saying. He's saying like the culture, the woke culture is like killing comedy. I'm like, is it really though? Like, there's still plenty of comedy.
Yeah.
And your comedies weren't any good to begin with, by my opinion. So I don't care. Don't do any more comedies. And even though I'm annoyed by what he said, I'm still gonna go see Joker out of curiosity. It's nothing to do with him.
Don't you dare insult Old School.
Old School's not terrible by it. It's a silly movie. Like I can't pick on it too much. It's really silly. So am I really gonna pick on it too hard? Well, no. I don't know. I remember. I just was sick of it because like when I saw it with a bunch of friends, they all loved it, and I was like, but they loved it.
It's really dated.
It really is. Yeah. It's not the worst thing in the world, though.
I guess some of the Will Ferrell stuff's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Crap,
what did I see him in recently? Well, I can't remember. Will Ferrell's still pretty funny most of the time. Again, I think he's better for sketches than movies. Like, he's the type of guy, like, stretching his stuff out to a whole movie really doesn't work. Like the Anchorman movies. Like, they're funny for, like, the first, like, half hour.
I agree.
Then when they try to, like, have a plot, it's like, oh, who cares?
Yeah, that movie I like parts of, but I don't like it as a whole. And I haven't seen part 2 yet.
The Anchorman movie? The second one is really off the rails. Like, it's funny. It's like they try to have a plot and then they just abandon it, which you kind of can respect because you're like, well, yeah, that kind of makes sense because it's kind of just what I said. It's trying to have a plot. That's when it sucks. So they're like, fuck the plot. Let's just get zany. So it's worth seeing. I mean, if you like the first one. I mean, some of it, like, as you said, it seems dated even before the movie came out because there's a part where, like, he's got, like, it's supposed to take place only a few years later, supposed to be like 1980. And, like, when he winds up working for this new network, like, his main boss is a black woman and he, like, super overreacts to that. And then actually he starts dating her. And then there's a part where she takes him to have dinner with her family. And of course, he just says a bunch of ridiculous stuff to them.
Awesome.
Where he's like, he's trying to speak in Ebonics and stuff like that. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
that's been done to death, though.
Yeah, it's been done to death. That's what I mean by dated. I don't mean
it still kind of sounds funny, but it's been done to death.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. You didn't by any chance see Holmes and Watson, did you?
I did. Man, it was really bad. I thought it was
really?
I'm maybe not walking out of the theater bad like people had been doing, and that's why I thought. That's why I thought I was just so curious that people were like, people weren't just saying it was bad. They're like, this is one of the worst comedies. I won't go that far, but yeah, I thought it was pretty fucking bad. It was hard to get through for me.
I think I just like those guys.
I like those. I wanted to go to like it. Step Brothers is okay. I think that's what I saw. Yeah, that was on TV yesterday. I saw the Step Brothers on TV yesterday, and I was doing something else, and that has some funny bits.
How was Between Two Ferns?
Oh, that's worth a watch.
Is it really?
I mean, again, it's just basically his insulting interviews, and then they put a bit of a plot around it. In fact, Will Ferrell plays a role in it, where it's like he's gonna like work for Will Ferrell as like basically the crux of the movie. The idea is like he's just got this small little show, but if he can put it together some episodes and go on the road and get some good things, Will Ferrell will hire him and he'll go big time. I mean, it has a scene where they like steal a bunch of stuff from Peter Dinklage. How can you not like that?
Is he in it?
Yeah,
Peter Dinklage.
Peter Dinklage. They go. I don't want to give too much away, but they go to his house. And he's showing off that he's got how rich he is, and he's showing off that he's got all this art and stuff like that. And they're like steal a bunch of stuff from him because they need the money.
That's cool.
But yeah, I just saw that a few days ago. It's certainly worth watching. It's funny.
Yeah, I saw you.
Some of the. I don't want to give all the good jokes away, but I'll give one where he's like interviewing Paul Rudd, and he's just like, some people have it all, looks, talent, and he's like, what's it like to just have looks?
Turn down the new Halloween film. Turned it down.
Damn you, Rudd. Damn you. Yeah.
I'm busy doing Marvel movies, thank you. I'm an accomplished actor now.
I mean, I'm not one of those people that's a fan of just bringing back old cast members, but to me that seems appropriate. Like the new Jurassic Park, everyone's like, it has to be good because, Sam Neill and Laura Dern and what's his name are going to be. Jeff
really?
All three of them are going to be in the next one.
It's not going to be good. I can guarantee you that.
It's not going to be good. It's not going to help it.
Is it?
Jurassic Park loses its impact every time you do it. So now that we're on like a sixth movie, give me a break. Oh, we have to run away from dinosaurs again.
Is it directed by the same guy that did the last two?
I don't know. I haven't seen the last one. It's funny. I actually thought like Jurassic World was okay, but then when Jurassic World like 2 came out, I had no desire to see it.
When I saw it in the theater, I liked it okay. I've watched
That's how I felt about the first one.
And yeah, I've got problems with both, but I've got a lot of problems with the second one. It's I've got a lot of problems just with like physics and stuff. They just don't make sense, Right.
But just dragging back actors from like original movies for like the 15th sequel, like who cares? Like the same thing they're doing with what's her name for the new Terminator.
Yep, I agree.
Linda Hamilton. It's like it has to be good. They brought Linda Hamilton back. We haven't seen her since she hasn't been in them since the good ones.
You know what they're saying? Like James Cameron's back as a producer.
Big fucking deal. Who cares who's back as producers? Producer means nothing. Producer just means I had no objection to this movie and I get checks from it.
I want to get some money, yeah.
It's like when they say Quentin Tarantino presents. Like, who cares?
Well, some of that stuff's been okay.
Not the Man with the Iron Fists, I tell you that. Holy shit, that was bad.
They made a sequel to that too.
Oh my god, of course they did.
I didn't know Quentin Tarantino did that.
I just assumed he did. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I had like one of the guys from Wu-Tang Clan in it, right?
Yep. Which makes sense because they're all about like kung fu. Like again, it's a movie that sounds like something I'd like, sort of a tribute to the old kung fu movies, but it's just ridiculous nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it for being
Russell Crowe in there.
nonsense, but
he's completely out of place. Russell Crowe.
Oh yeah, see, I hate Russell Crowe and everything he does. So he's one of those guys. I'm like, shit, I'm not watching this.
I like his really early roles, but
and like Gladiator.
By the time he was a big star, I didn't like any of his stuff. But I really like him in The Quick and the Dead. I like him in L.A. Confidential.
Romper Stomper.
Yeah, his '90s stuff I'm good with, but after Gladiator and he became a huge star, I didn't really care about anything he did. Probably his most overrated movie besides Gladiator, because I can at least still like Gladiator, is the one after that, A Beautiful Mind. That movie sucks. And it's one of those movies that's supposed to be based on real life that like fucks up the facts so much that it's actually an affront. We've had this conversation many times. You're going to make a historical movie about somebody real. Yeah, you're going to move some things around. You're going to change some things for the sake of a narrative, but you can't change some of the stuff they changed. And some of it just is ridiculous. Yeah.
That's one of those like sad white people like Oscar grab movies.
Absolutely. Like, the only thing I like about it is like it's got Jennifer Connelly, who I really like.
Yeah.
Not that she's really doing anything in the movie. She's just being Jennifer Connelly more or less. But that movie sucks, man.
I didn't like that or the damn Cinderella Man. I didn't like that either.
No, just washed over me. I was like, I don't care.
I watched both of them, but I think I may have seen Beautiful Mind in the theater too.
And that was another one where they changing the facts again, like to suit the narrative, like because the German guy he fights was really nice, and they make him like an evil monster in the movie.
You gotta have a villain.
Yeah. But he was like known for being a super nice guy. And also like notably like anti like the very German establishment at the time, because it was like around the time like some of that right-wing Nazism stuff was starting to ramp up, and he was like totally against that.
Oh, was this pre-World War II?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. I didn't even realize.
I think this would have been the early to mid-30s.
Oh, okay.
Might have even been 35. Something like that. Because, yeah, it's easy to forget. But there were lots of good Germans back then, too. And some of them were just in bad positions. Like the guy, he was like the main, in the 1936 Berlin Olympics, he was like, they're kind of like Germany's star athlete. He was like their track and field guy, and he like competed against Jesse Owens and a bunch of stuff. Like, and he was supposed to be like, Hitler's idea of like the idealized Nordic Aryan man. And of course, then Jesse Owens beat him and everything. But like, he liked Jesse Owens, was very nice to him, and even helped him like with his technique for something. Like, so he didn't believe in any of that nonsense about like racial purity or stuff. And yet he had to like stand on like a podium with Hitler next to him, with Hitler like holding his arm up and stuff. Like, what can you do?
You do what you're told.
Yeah. At least he wasn't a soldier. It's not like he had to kill people or anything like that. He just had to smile and be like, "Yes, I'm Hitler's champion," or whatever like that.
You don't want to be murdered, so
yeah. That's why it's so annoying. All these Russian athletes kissing up to Putin. I was so happy a few months ago when Artemi Panarin, who is an NHL player, who now he's a New York Ranger, hasn't played for them yet, but he signed with the New York Rangers. He actually said some things critical of Putin, and it made him by far the most high-profile Russian athlete to actually criticize Putin. Like, he didn't say anything that damning, but he actually, did criticize him, which I think was fantastic. I was like, wow, you got balls. Because most of them, they just bow down to him and kiss his ass. Especially the hockey players, actually, because Putin's a big hockey fan, and he plays. So often, like, sometimes he'll play games with, like, NHLers, like, playing, like, letting him score and shit. Like, ugh.
I bet.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's funny, because usually it's only countries like North Korea, right, where they, like, really ramp up the ridiculous propaganda, where it's like, our invincible leader can do anything. I mean, Russia's mostly not like that, despite the regime. But then you have like headlines. It's like in like hockey game, Putin scores 9 goals. It's like, yeah, because everybody fucking let him. What you think this like 50-year-old small politician like is amazing? Like you know, he would have been one of the best players in the world when he was in his 20s or something, but he somehow missed his calling. Like, give me a break. Well, I'm not afraid to go on YouTube and say, Mr. Putin, I don't approve of your policies, and you're a shitty hockey player.
We just lost all of our Russian viewers.
Oh, damn. Truth hurts sometimes.
That's funny. Yeah, he chose to pursue a career in politics instead of a career in hockey.
Well, it turned out to be more profitable. As much as an NHL star makes, nobody makes the money Putin makes.
That is true.
Oh, I mean, sure, his official salary is like equivalent to like 150,000 US, but he obviously controls billions. But anyway, getting too political.
Yeah.
With our weird stance, our controversial stance on Putin.
Controversial.
But we can circle back to the movie to finish up. I don't know. This is a movie that it doesn't really have any one thing that really stands out about it. It doesn't have like any really great performances. The performances are fine. They're good. There's nobody that stands out. It doesn't really have any super memorable scene. It's just a movie that I feel is just kind of solid start to finish. It just is really efficient, sort of, in telling the story it's supposed to tell in the style it wants to do. I think it's one of the better cases of like a book being adapted to the screen and the book and the spirit of the book really being conveyed through the movie. That's a hard thing to do. I think the movie does it. As we said, one of the big benefits is the way it's shot, to have, and some of the music too, to have sort of this kind of dreamy, hazy atmosphere, because again, it's memory, it's in the past, it's also a secondhand story. It's about the girls, but it's told through these boys, which I think is pretty cool. One thing that you can't exactly translate is sort of the rotating narrators, so they just stick with the Giovanni Ribisi, which I'm fine with. You kind of need that. It would be kind of confusing to have multiple narrators, I think. And it simplifies, again, a bit from the book, in that it sort of focuses on like a main group of 4. In the book, there's even more of them. There's like, I don't know, 7 or 8, maybe even more. Some of them just only show up for a chapter and then they're gone. It's kind of, they drift in and out. That's harder to do with the movie. I still think the movie has kind of that drifting feel anyway. So I think that's one of the major successes of the movie. It's funny to me that somebody could like criticize her for being perverse, as if it's some sort of celebration of suicide. It's not a celebration of suicide. It's actually showing the not just the tragedy of suicide, but also the incomprehensible how suicide is in many ways, in that it doesn't provide answers, or it doesn't provide even really too many clues. We're just sort of left confused and baffled, which is very much the case in most cases in real life, where sometimes there's signs to a certain extent, but a lot of the time it's very confusing and baffling, plus just the obvious that suicide is against human nature. So to think of a whole set of sisters in a family all doing it is just mystifying and tragic, but also interesting. I mean, morbidly interesting, but interesting, fascinating. The girls were fascinating when they were alive, and they're even more fascinating after they die. And it's lingered, and it's left this effect not just on the boys, but the whole community. But really, it's about the boys who have grown into men now, and they just can't get past it. They've never found answers. They've never gotten to know the girls the way they wanted to, and they just can't get away from it, and it'll be with them forever.
You're right, because like had they aged and grown up and they saw the cracks and they saw that they were real people and had faults, like they probably would have been able to move on much easier.
Right.
But
instead, they'll just always remember them as these young, beautiful girls that were like unknowable. Mm-hmm. They were fascinating, and they were mysterious, and they were unknowable. And then they died in a very weird, tragic, baffling way. And then they're gone. And you're just left with the memory and the echo of them.
That memory is just in their brain forever.
Mm-hmm. And you can see how, like, how that would be in real life.
Sure.
Like, absolutely, it would affect you in that way.
Was there ever any I mean, this is not like based on any kind of true story at all, is it? Like,
I don't think so.
like
The
that.
closest it is what happened was it was something like the author, when he was a kid, he had a babysitter who was a teenage girl, and she told him that she had at least one or two other sisters had like attempted suicide or something.
Oh,
I think that's what it is. I'll find out.
makes sense. But yeah, until you brought this up to watch, and I like honestly, like, I mean, I've seen this film a few times. I saw it back when it came out, and probably like a decade ago is the last time I saw it. And I wasn't really excited to watch it again because I didn't really have any feelings one way or the other about it. I didn't really like it or dislike it. But on this watch, I really did gain a lot of respect for, I mean, you say, first directorial debut, but I mean, hell, her dad is Francis Ford Coppola, so I'm sure she's, dabbled a bit. But, Sophia's first, theatrical film. And it's really great. There's a lot of really unique things that she does, cinematography wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when they talk about she wrote the name of someone in her underwear, and then when Trip shows up for the dance,
oh yeah, they give you the
it shows the little peek into her panties. But I've seen that done so many times in movies made after that. So many like quirky. I can't remember what exactly movie it was, but it would like show a bomb in the briefcase or a bomb like in the car or someone in the trunk. Just
to highlight something for us that the other people can't see.
That's become a pretty common technique, and that may be the oldest I've seen it used.
Yeah, actually, one thing we forgot is like the opening has like spirally feminine letters for the writing that is obviously an echo of the way the girls might write in their diaries. And then there's a few things where there's a couple sort of kind of like dream type sequences. They're kind of are like, again, fantasies that a girl might have. Remember there was that thing of, and then how it all gets blown up. The boys, remember they're seeing like Lux, and Lux is like, dancing in a field in the sunlight, and she has like a big flower and she blows it, and it's all very dreamy and stuff. Yeah, so the movie also has those cool sort of dreamy, specifically feminine visuals, which I think are really good, and they're not overused. Like they're only here and there.
Yeah, but I feel like they're used a lot in the promotional, like on the cover.
Oh,
it's like a shot of Lux, in that dreamlike state. I think pretty much every poster, everything has got whatever her name is on the front of everything.
Kirsten Dunst,
yeah. God.
Yeah, a lot of the posters are just her face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, which almost makes it seem like the virgin suicides is just like, well, wait a second, suicides plural, who else?
Which I think is kind of a mistake, but I mean, I guess she was.
Well, that's more of a marketing thing.
But I mean, she must have been somewhat of a popular actress at the time to plaster her face all over everything. But hell, maybe she was already cast in Spider-Man or something. Like, no, not at 60.
No, I think it's too early.
But like 2001 is when they shot that, right? So yeah, not too much in the future.
No, not too much.
I was trying to.
But yeah, it has a good visual style for that. It's a nice juxtaposition of sort of some of that dreamy imagery with just the mundanity of ordinary suburban life. The opening is just some camera moving through the neighborhood, showing the houses and the neighbors and stuff like that. It's all very ordinary, which is the point, because the whole point is this takes place in the heart of suburbia. It's a very sort of plain environment. And this is another thing that's been hammered home in a lot of movies, including a movie that I famously despise from the same year, American Beauty, which is kind of the idea that like when you have these sort of banal, ordinary, everyday environments that people are used to, lurking underneath the surface are sometimes deep, dark, and sometimes tragic things. Obviously, I would point to this movie as the better example, but people like American Beauty. I'm not going to come down on them, but I've always hated that movie. But that is something that is also expressed in American Beauty, is that kind of idea that underneath the surface of this very plain, ordinary, everyday world is there's darker, more complex things, which is kind of a theme I like in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
This movie reminds me of an Ang Lee movie called The Ice Storm, because that's also set in the 70s.
That's a Tobey Maguire?
Yeah, I think so.
That's a great one.
But that's a good movie. That's an interesting movie.
Very dark, yeah, very, very similar in tone.
A lot of interesting dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a play, that movie. This movie's more cinematic and more artistic, I think. At least in its presentation.
Yeah, I agree.
The other movie, The Ice Storm, is more about dialogue and drama. This movie is, again, more about youth and memory.
I was going to say Thora Birch, but it's not. It's Wednesday Addams.
Christina Ricci?
I believe she's in it.
I think so, yeah. I haven't seen it in a few years. I'd like to see it again. But also, since that movie's also set in the 70s, it just kind of reminds me of this movie, because they have kind of a similar look in some ways. But yeah, it's a pretty good movie.
Yeah. Yeah, we need to cover that on here sometime. That'd be a good...
Yeah, I'd be for that.
But, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm glad we watched this one.
Yeah, I'd like to own it. I'd like to get the Criterion release for it and see some of the extras and stuff in interviews with the cast, which are on there. Hear some of their impressions of it. I think it'll always remain a really big moment in Kirsten Dunst's career. It really got her out there, especially as she said, the marketing and almost made her look like the star. And I guess if there is a star, it is her, which kind of goes against the spirit of the book in a way, but I sort of understand how, because of the events that they had to keep and the events they had to cut out, which weren't too many, it kind of puts the focus on Lux's character, which is okay, because you could say that the stuff that happened to Lux was maybe the main catalyst for the suicide in the end. It's interesting to note that when the reporter is summing things up after the final suicide, she seems to suggest that ever since the first suicide, that this had been the plan all along. And of course, that's just her using conjecture, which is not very good reporting. But the whole point is we don't know. We don't know when they decided. We know certainly the suicide of Cecilia had a huge effect on them, but it did seem like they made a legitimate effort to try to move on with their lives. And then things just became too oppressive and terrible because of the actions of their parents. That's part of it. But again, we never get a clear reason, which is part of the point.
Yeah, that makes you wonder. It's not like they were abused. I mean, they were just so sheltered.
Yeah.
Like there are plenty of kids that are like physically, verbally, mentally, raped, abused, everything, that wind up, just fine.
Mm-hmm.
And some don't. And some, commit suicide.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, suicide will always be a very mysterious sort of topic, because I think there's certain people that no matter what they go through, it's just not in them.
Yeah.
And that other people, some of the more common things, yeah, maybe that will make it. And then for other people, you really don't know. And that's kind of the case here. It's like we can only guess, but we don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. As someone who's like had suicidal thoughts when I was younger and acted on them a few times and stuff, it's funny now because I can't even remember it too well. It's almost like being in a different state of mind, which is kind of the same thing. Like, I might as well admit that I had a period in my 20s too, around the same time, where I cut myself. And it's weird because I can't relate to that person now. Like, if I were to talk to somebody now and they say, like, why did you do it, or what was it like? I don't have an answer, really. I don't remember it very well, and it was kind of like somebody else doing it. Like, I remember it, I don't know. And everybody has their different reasons for it. And so you say, well, didn't you have reasons? I guess I did. But I mean, none of them really make that much sense. A lot of them, I don't know. I've heard different things, you know. Some of them seem more common. I've heard girls, especially. I know that was another thing. I never really liked talking about cutting because it always seemed like more of a feminine thing. It was something I didn't want to admit. I was like, "Are you a 13-year-old girl?" Because you know, I was a man in my 20s when I was doing it. But the obvious one, sometimes people talk about the one that people can usually latch onto is when people talk about like I wanted to punish myself. That absolutely was not the case for me. And sometimes people said, you know, I'm so numb, I just wanted to feel something. I guess that's a legit thing too. The closest I could come up with is I would get sort of panicky to a point where I felt like I needed some sort of physical manifestation of what I was feeling. And I used to call it bleeding it out. It was kind of like I felt like whatever was in me, the only way I could get it to come out was if I was bleeding from a bunch of places. I don't know. It doesn't really make much sense now.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as suicide goes, like, I really can't remember anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
Like certain, like, because most of the cuts I used to make were very superficial, but the cuts I made for suicide, like, I have almost no recollection of that at all. Like, I don't know. It's not like a blackout situation. I know it wasn't, or a fugue state. It's just, I don't know. I think it's just a completely different state of mind, to the point where even so, I'm somebody that was closer to it than the average person, but I still am just as baffled by suicide as most people.
Yeah.
Is probably maybe the main thing that maybe some people don't understand, especially when I think about people that like are willing to commit suicide for something that has less to do with themselves personally, like people that commit suicide in protest. Like, what kind of person are you that you lived your whole life and then you found something that you feel so strongly about that you're willing to end it, and usually in a very terrible, painful way? Like people that burn themselves alive to protest like the Vietnam War. Like, man, like that is just so outside of like the normal human, I don't know, instincts.
Or like a hunger strike. That sounds like that'd be pretty painful.
Yeah, that's a slow way of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I always had thoughts, or quite often had thoughts. I was always pissed off at myself for not having the balls to go through with it. So, yeah, I can definitely relate.
That's certainly how I felt in the aftermath of a few times when I got arrested for it a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm admitting stuff. I've been arrested 4 times in 3 cities for being a danger to myself, I'll just say, and I can remember that very clearly every time there. You know, obviously the frustration, also the humiliation,
Right.
and the embarrassment. I can remember once like being in the ambulance and like apologizing to everybody for wasting their time. It was a really rough moment at one point. I was 24, and I remember I was in the ambulance, and like there was a young guy, one of the paramedics or whatever like that. He was trying to just say something to make me feel better. And he said something like, well, he remembered what it was like to be a kid too. And I was like, I'm 24. And he's like, okay, so you're older than me. And I was like, I wanted to like,
Oh, wow.
and I wanted to like jump out of the car.
Oh,
Like,
man.
it was really humiliating.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can remember how I felt sort of in the aftermath. And like you said, some of it was like frustration and anger and thinking, well, why didn't you just do it? You know, what's really weird is, okay, since we're being all weird and personal, is okay, so my sister lives in another city. And for the last few years, she's had a couple jobs. And one of the jobs she's had more steadily, besides her main thing as a librarian, is that she worked in a yarn store. And she got not just doing normal counter stuff, but actually she got so good at it that she actually started teaching people how to like knit and stuff, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so she was in so there's a mall that her yarn store was in, and it's one of those malls that has 2 or 3 floors, and it's got like on the upper floors they're like, why am I so bad at architecture? What I mean is there's like a middle part that doesn't have any floor. So if you're on the 3rd floor, you can see right down to the 1st, right? There's a thing there. So many years ago, when I'd already had a really bad summer and I'd already been arrested once, I went to St. John with my parents to visit her. And while I was there, I stole the car and ran away from them. But before I got on the highway, I went to that mall. And I went up the top, and I thought really long and hard about trying to like jump over to kill myself on there. And then later, and I didn't do it obviously. And then later, I took the car and thought I'll go to Moncton and find my ex-girlfriend. So I was flying down the highway, and I got pulled over and blah blah. But anyway, just like 2 weeks ago, my mother called me and I was talking to her, and she said that my sister was really shaken up about something that happened when she was at work. Somebody at that mall did that. Jumped and splattered themselves.
Did you tell her then?
No.
You haven't told her?
I've never told anybody. They knew I was like fucked up and suicidal, but I never told them about the mall thing. But yeah.
Wow, that's crazy that someone did it from that same place.
Yeah. Luckily, my sister named Mary, she didn't see the body or anything like that, but she had like a couple coworkers that had to like come through that area, and they like saw like, you know, this person, I'm sure, was a bloody, horrible mess. So there were certain people that saw that would really mess you up just even seeing that. But yeah, I couldn't believe that when she told me.
Like, I'd like to do it to where like the cleanup is not hard for someone.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I'm thinking about it like after the fact, like it'd be easy to deal with for someone else, you know.
Yeah, here in Halifax, there's like a bridge over a train track that I used to go to and think about it. This was when I wasn't even really suicidal. It was just more like that was more of a hypothetical thing. It wasn't like, oh, I really want to do it. It was more like, this would be a good place to do it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's a natural thing to think about. Just the morbid curiosity.
Sure. But I mean, I did have that survival in me where I was just like, because you're thinking about ways to commit suicide, like how easy, just take a step. And yet every fiber of your being won't let you do it.
Right.
I mean, thank goodness.
Right.
It'd be really dumb to just slip too, which is something I thought about a few times. Like, imagine you just slipped. So stupid.
I've seen it happen.
But in the case of these girls, so we had, I mean, pretty amazing. One girl, the first girl jumps out of a window to impale herself. I mean, with the goal of impaling herself, because it wasn't high enough to like kill herself. So I mean, crazy. And then you've got the more standard ways. And I'll just say now, it's a good thing like I never owned a gun, because I probably would be dead, because I think I probably could have pulled the trigger.
Mm. Yeah.
That's usually the main way. That's more of a... Women don't really do that. Men often shoot themselves. Women usually do the others.
Yeah, men are usually like car accident or gun.
Gun, yeah.
Women are usually...
Women are like cutting themselves or pills.
Yeah. Which is like, I've read a lot of stuff that says a lot of that is more of a cry for attention, because those are less likely to actually be fatal.
I'm pretty sure that was in my mind when I did mine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, I've had cousins and relatives try to OD on Tylenol and stuff, and
because I mean, I've got scars all up here, and they're very visible. I've got like nothing here. You can't see where it happened at all.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. That's odd.
I think it's just because they were. Yeah, I think it's just because they weren't strong cuts, you know.
Right.
But yeah, to this day, you would never see it on film here. You can't really see it, but my arms are quite scarred up and down, and chest too. But in person, they're pretty noticeable. Yeah. I think most, 99% of the time, people are just pretty discreet. They're not going to say anything to me about it.
Sure.
But I assume, like, people I took martial arts with and stuff like that, they obviously saw. It is what it is.
You're not like Amy Adams, where you have to be head to toe covered with.
Yeah, I wonder if that's more of a girl thing too, because I remember when I was doing that sort of thing, talking to most of the people I knew that cut were girls. They would cut the legs a lot. And that was something that never even occurred to me, cutting my legs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just don't know.
Yeah, but Amy Adams and that, yeah. See, that's a whole different cutting thing that's quite different than mine. I'm sure it was, because hers, it seemed to be more like maybe. Actually, I don't know. But it seemed like the pain was really important.
Yeah. It's like she was dealing with emotional pain, and then maybe trying to make the physical pain overwhelm that emotional pain or something. I don't know.
Yeah, or some sort of transference, which again, I think I was sort of doing. That was kind of my bleeding out sort of rationality, whatever like that. But I think I also got kind of a high from it, because if I was bleeding for enough places, I got lightheaded.
Yeah.
And I think that would kind of settle down negative thoughts or anything. Like I would just sort of have a high.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm just trying to think of other movies that deal with suicide. Obviously, I've seen other movies, but now I can't really think. Because often, a lot of the movies that have suicide in them aren't about suicide. They're more like, some sort of like horror thing or something like that. It like starts with somebody killing themselves, but it's it's not real life. It's more like some sort of supernatural thing.
Right.
I'm trying to think of movies that like realistically deal with suicide like this. I mean, obviously there are, but I can't really think of others at the moment. Contrast and compare.
I mean, usually it's it's not as lighthearted as this film. It's usually like it happens at the beginning, and then you watch the family cope for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Or something,
Yeah. As I said, I think if they made this movie now, it would be more like that.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be more about like really digging into it, which goes against the spirit of the movie. The why is part of the movie, but the whole point is the why is always there without a clear answer. It's like the why is there. We wonder why. Why? But yeah. Which again, I think is a really good choice. But yeah, most of the time when I can think of movies with suicide, it has less to do with like the issues, the emotional or mental issues. It was more like some sort of bizarre, crazy situation or something.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, I don't know, some guy breaks a bunch of laws and the cops are closing in, so he shoots himself or something like that. Different thing. That's a desperation suicide. That's a take the easy way out suicide, which happens. That happens in a lot of movies. It's like, oh, I'm gonna get torn apart. I understand, and that's an understandable suicide. That's something. That's a suicide that an audience can relate to. If a zombie horde was coming at me and I had one bullet, obviously, better to shoot yourself than get eaten alive.
Right.
Yeah, it'll probably occur to me later some movies that actually tackle suicide in a more realistic way, like this movie, but I can't think for the moment.
Yeah, I can't really think of any either. Not right off.
It's funny. This is unrelated, but it's kind of a funny quote by Eugenides about how some people, when they reviewed the book, they referred to the narration about the different boys, calling them kind of like some similar to like a Greek chorus. And he's like, I'm pretty sure people only use that because my name is Greek. Because I'm like, it's not a Greek chorus. It's too specific to be a Greek chorus, really. Because like I've read a lot of those ancient Greek tragedies, and the chorus is there to fill in gaps and sometimes point out things that aren't as obvious. They're not. I mean, they frame a story sometimes, but it's different. A Greek chorus is not the same as a narrator. So I feel like sometimes people just want to throw out literary terms to sound clever or smart. Mm-hmm. I like what he said. They're just saying that because my name is a Greek.
Sounds about right. It plays better.
It's funny. I was looking at different copies of the book. The first edition cover is just a close-up of one of the girl's hair. You don't even see her face. It's just all hair. It's kind of interesting for a cover. But this was a really successful book that launched his career, and he went on to write a few other books. Like I said, it was funny that I saw those books at the library, but not this one. But yeah, the inspiration for the plot came to him through his nephew's teenage babysitter, who told him that she and all her sisters had tried to commit suicide in the past, the first time he met her, which is a really weird thing to say to somebody the first time you meet them, but it was his nephew's babysitter. Okay. But the book's only 249 pages, so a fairly short book. So, which is to the benefit of a movie, of course. Like they didn't have to cut too many things. They, as I said, they simplified some things by cutting down the number of boys. The whole thing about Mary living a bit longer at the end, they changed that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a really weird thing about one of the boys, his grandmother's dying, and it might be suicide or something. I don't know. I'd have to read the book to understand what they mean by that. Premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. Yeah, much of the dialogue and narration is taken verbatim from its source, which is nice. Which I think you can tell because it's pretty strong, especially the narration. I think I'm pretty sure the narration is just lifted directly from the book.
Oh, yeah.
And I like Rivisi's delivery on it because it is supposed to be kind of flat and unemotional. I mean, I think that's kind of the point. Because he's not remembering something pleasant. He's remembering something tragic and also something that still to this day is, baffling. So, you wouldn't relate that in a, I don't know, happy voice.
Yeah.
Or a particularly angry or sad voice either. You could say it was sad, I don't know. But some people might have, I don't know, might complain and say it doesn't sound like he's really trying at all in this narration. But to me, I would say that's kind of the point. It's supposed to be sort of flat and monotone, and
right,
because of the subject matter, it makes sense.
I think he does a great job with the narration.
Yeah, and it's good too, as I said, that it doesn't specify which boy he is, because that's also sort of the point.
Well, it's they're all of them. He speaks for all of them.
He speaks for all of them. And that's how it is. It's like the girls are like one entity and the boys are another. And being individuals isn't that important. Lux, of course, has her moments and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's supposed to be kind of like how they're entities more so than individuals. Yeah, the closest thing to insight we get is with Cecilia, where she has that line about, "You've never been a 13-year-old girl." Apart from that, there's nearly nothing to really talk about motivation. Beyond, of course, after Cecilia's death, them being upset about Cecilia's death, and then, of course, being upset about the way they're being cut off from the world of their parents. But I think we can wrap up on that. But yeah, I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah.
I was happy to see it again, too. It hadn't been too long, but there's definitely a lot of stuff I've forgotten. Particularly, I've forgotten about the Sloan songs, which is kind of weird. You think I'd remember that right off, but I like how they fit in because, again, they feel kind of 70s, even though they're 90s songs. It's too bad the soundtrack doesn't have more of them. The official soundtrack only has one Sloan song on it. I think it's Everything You've Done Wrong, which is a fun song. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see, the two Heart songs. Yeah, one is Magic Man, and the other is Crazy on You.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. And the Styx song "Come Sail Away" is played at the dance.
Appropriate.
Yeah, kind of a neat moment where all the balloons come down, they're dancing, and it's the one time the girls get to sort of feel like normal girls. And one of them even says, "I'm having the best time." And it's like, it's just a dance, but yeah, to them it's so liberating because they just never experienced anything like it.
Yeah.
They never got to go out and be with their peers and listen to popular music and hold a boy's hand and stuff. It's funny though, there's a little bit where, remember, Lux is head over heels for Trip at this point, and they go under like the bleachers or whatever to make out, and one of the other girls comes with the boy to make out too, but they only make out for a few seconds, and she kind of decides she's not really into it. It's funny. And then they just look over at Lux, and it's just like, eh. It's like, I'm not quite as free as Lux.
Yeah. Hayden Christensen. It's his fault.
He's just so damn unlikable. I can believe it. It's funny though, like I really like a sappy drama he's in. He's in what is it? Something House. How to Build a House. Fuck. Something like that. I think Kevin Kline's his dad or something. Anyway, I like it. it is, you know, I talk about some of these things and I say it's good they don't get into melodrama. This one does, but I like it anyway. Yeah, something house, something like that. But anyway, it's like, what is it? His parents are divorced and he's been with his mom for a while, but now he's back with his dad and he's acting out. He's all goth and angsty and stuff, and he's doing all this stuff, and I don't know. And
I
eventually,
think I have seen that.
and
Yeah.
his dad is like dying of cancer or something. Like, it has all the hallmarks of melodrama, and I'm sure it probably didn't get well received in its day, but I like it. I thought that was really good. Life as a House, that's what it is. It's Life as a House. And the whole thing is, yeah, throughout the whole thing, his father's building a house for some reason, even though he's dying. I don't know. It definitely is melodramatic, and some of the stuff is a little over the top, and one of those things where they're trying to hit the audience over the head to make you feel things, which usually I'm critical of. And I'm not saying I shouldn't. It just appeals to me. It's the one time I feel like I kind of like Hayden Christensen's acting, even though you could just say, well, he's just being a douche. Well, he's pretty good at being a douche, I guess. Because, yeah, he's all goth with, like, dyed hair and piercings and stuff. And he's like, fuck you, Dad. And he's in, like, doing, like, petty crime and stuff. I don't know. I like it. Life is a House. I'll probably watch that again sometime soon if I get the opportunity. But not nearly as good a movie as Virgin Suicides, which I would say is very, very well done movie, artistic. And has brought out a lot of personal feelings in us tonight. So.
Right.
I don't know. That's the mark of a good movie to me. So.
Yeah.
So that'll finish that up. And I've been teasing for a while that we had a bit of a series to do for October. So I will say that, as I said, we're going to try to do another episode this week to try to catch up a little bit because we've fallen behind and we don't want to lose October. So our next episode, whether it's tomorrow or within the next couple of days, will be the first episode in our series, which is going to be on the new French what is it? Extremism? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. I'm sure people have heard of it before, which is a subgenre of French films that kind of emerged from the late 90s going into the late 2000s, basically a decade there. There's of course some outliers, which is you know, in a more general sense, you could classify them as maybe thrillers or horror. They certainly have those elements. But what sort of ties them together is having kind of like shocking content.
Mm-hmm.
And we figured that would sort of be appropriate for October, going towards Halloween, to do something like that. And we've both seen some movies in the genre, but there's also some other ones we haven't seen that I'd like an excuse to see. So we're figuring that out now. I'm not gonna say what movie we're doing next because we're not 100% on it yet. But we do have. Okay, well, what I'm thinking of is one I haven't seen. It's called Demon Lover.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. So
which sounds pretty cool. But yeah, if people want to know like an example of these movies, a more straightforward, simple one that we're not going to do is like High Tension, which
right.
is, but I mean that fits. What is there? There's like In My Skin or something is one.
Martyrs,
yeah, with the torture stuff. So yeah, they basically it really sort of got going around 98 and went 2008, 2009. Again, there's outliers. There's some as late as 2014. There's some as early as the earlier 90s. But the heyday was kind of between 98 and 2009 or so. So yeah, so there's a few that we've seen. And they're highly sort of debated movies where people really debate whether or not like how artistic they are, or if they're just, you know, schlock that's out to just deliberately shock the audience like some of those horror movies are. So we'll be able to talk about that. But yeah, I think that'll be fun. So it's going to be the new French extremism for October, and hopefully we can get 3 or 4 done. In best case scenario, that's what we'd like to do. Otherwise, not really a series. So yeah, hopefully in the next few days things will stabilize a bit, and we'll be able to get some out more consistently. And the new episode, as we said, the next episode will not be, hopefully, it shouldn't be next week. It should be within this week. So keep an eye out for that. And we'll have our first episode, which might possibly be Demon Lover. That's what we're leaning towards right now. But I don't know. Maybe after we watch it, we'll think we don't have anything to say about it, which is always a possibility with a movie we both haven't seen. So we'll see how that goes. But until then, thanks so much for being with us, guys. That was The Virgin Suicides, 1999, Sofia Coppola. And some frank discussion about suicide and self-harm and all that fun stuff, all that cheerful stuff. But yeah, even though the new French extremism stuff has some very heavy content too, in a way it's more tongue-in-cheek, it's less realistic, so it won't be as heavy or personal as this episode was. Yeah, it'll be more like fun horror, I think. But yeah, I think it's an interesting genre, and certainly one that we both would like to get a little more acquainted with. We've both seen kind of a handful of movies, but I'd like to be able to see a few more. So this is a good opportunity for that. So that's it for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back very soon, hopefully, for the debut of that series. So I'm Cole, and that's Jay. We thank you very much. And thanks so much. Have a good night. We'll see you.
Thanks, guys.
Peace.